Good evening, everyone. The Town of Los Gatos Planning Commission meeting of August 9, 2023 is now called to order. And as we begin tonight, as always, we request staff to make a presentation regarding the town's rules of civility and decorum.
The public is welcome to participate in the meetings, understanding that the purpose of the meeting is to conduct the important business of the town in an efficient and effective manner. For the benefit of the entire community, the Town of Los Gatos asks that all speakers follow the town's meeting guidelines by treating everyone with respect and dignity. This is done by following meeting guidelines set forth in state law, in the town code, and on the cover sheet of the agenda. The town embraces diversity and strongly condemns hate speech and offensive hateful language or racial intolerance of any kind at board, commission, or committee meetings. Town council and staff are well aware of the public's right to disagree with their professional opinion on various town issues. However, antisocial behavior, slander, hatred, and bigotry statements are completely unacceptable and will not be tolerated in any way, shape, or form at board, commission, or committee meetings. All public comments at the board, commission, or committee meeting must pertain to items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the town and shall not contain slanderous statements, hatred, and bigotry against non-public officials. The town will go through the following steps if a disturbance results from a member of the public not following these rules. If participating remotely, town staff may mute the individual with an explanation for the record of why muting occurred consistent with this policy. If participating in person, the chair may call a recess for violation of this policy, resulting in the immediate cessation of the audio and video recording and the commissioners exiting the chamber or meeting room. Staff will determine if the individual should be removed or if all members of the public should leave, depending on the extent of the disturbance. In the event that all public members exit, only the press would be allowed back in the meeting. Once the individual or individuals leave, the commissioners would return to the chamber or meeting room and the chair would resume the meeting. Persons disrupting a board, commission, or committee meeting may be cited for violation of the California Penal Code, Section 403.
Thank you for that presentation, and I'll ask everyone to silence their devices if they haven't already done so. And we'll commence with the roll call. Commissioner Hanson?
Here.
Commissioner Raspy?
Here.
Commissioner Thomas?
Here.
Commissioner Burnett?
Here.
Commissioner Clark?
Here.
Commissioner Janoff?
Here.
And I am here as well. And so we'll proceed with the Pledge of Allegiance, led tonight by Commissioner Hanson.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I have a few preliminary remarks to make before we begin the substantive part of the meeting. During tonight's meeting, any person desiring to speak must be first recognized by the chair. All participants must speak only from the mic or when called on in Zoom. Public comments shall be directed to the commission and staff as a body and not to the audience. No person other than commissioners, staff, and the person having the floor shall be permitted to enter into the discussion. No member of the public is allowed to speak a second time on an item. And to assure the opportunity for all members of the public to speak, there's no yielding of time to another speaker. Okay, so as the Planning Commission conducts the meeting this evening, we encourage public participation, which is essential to our democracy and important to the work of the Planning Commission. Public input is very much welcomed and is always carefully considered. The public's participation may occur in two different ways. First, written comments may be submitted to the staff prior to the meeting, and we have received several for tonight. And during the meeting, there are two opportunities for members of the public to participate. First, during verbal communications, an individual may speak on any topic that is not on the agenda for tonight's meeting. And during the hearing tonight on agenda items 2 and 3, any member of the public may speak about that item. And you'll be advised when these times occur. If you wish to address the commission tonight, either during verbal communications or in the discussion on agenda items 2 and 3, please raise your hand in the Zoom app, or for those here in person, please complete a speaker card, which is located on the bench in front of you, and turn that over to staff. And we ask that you please print your name carefully, because I have trouble reading handwriting sometimes. And you may indicate if you're speaking anonymously, otherwise we would appreciate having your address as well. Let's see, when you come to speak, I ask that you speak into the microphone, and that's important because the meeting is recorded. And also when you're called on to speak, okay, so we'll move on to verbal communications now, and ask members of the public to address the commission on any matter that is not on the agenda for tonight's meeting, and you have 3 minutes to speak. Are there any questions of the commissioners or presentations at this time by members of the public who are on matters not on the agenda? I don't see any. So we'll move on to the consent calendar. Tonight we have one item on the consent calendar, which is approval of the minutes of our meeting on July 26th. And before the Planning Commission acts on the consent calendar, any member of the commission may request that this item be removed from the consent calendar. And do we have any requests for removal? Well, I don't see any. Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar? Commissioner Clark.
I move to approve the consent calendar.
And a second? Commissioner Thomas.
I second.
Is there any discussion? If not, I'll call the question and ask commissioners to raise their hand first for those who are in support. And it's unanimous. Thank you very much. So now we'll move on to item 2 on the agenda, which is consideration of an appeal of the Community Development Director's decision to deny a tree removal permit on property zoned R18, tree removal permit T23-089, located at 16496 Hilo Road, APN 532-04-072, categorically exempt pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15304. Minor alterations to land. The property owner and appellant is Kim and Nico Haley, and the project planner is Mr. Ryan Safdie. Can I have a show of hands of commissioners who have visited the property? And are there any disclosures tonight? Okay. Mr. Safdie, I understand you'll give the staff report on this item 2.
Yes, thank you, and good evening, commissioners. As mentioned, before you tonight is an appeal of a Community Development Director decision to deny a tree removal permit at 16496 Hilo Road. The property owners applied to remove 2 large redwood trees in their front yard. The trees were noted by the owners as being 8 feet from the foundation and causing damage to the foundation. This permit was denied by the town arborist as none of the findings for removal could be made. The trees are estimated by the town to be roughly 15 feet from the foundation and 8 and 10 feet away from the covered porch. No visible damage to the foundation or the porch located in between the trees and the foundation was evident during this site inspection. And so instead, the town arborist directed the owners to conduct structural pruning to these trees. The property owners appealed this denial as they feel the tree is damaging their foundation and has outgrown the property. The owners provided additional information within their appeal, including a receipt for foundation repair and an invoice statement from a design group showing that engineering inspections and foundation work occurred in 2015. The appeal also notes that a termite inspector looked at the property earlier this year and noted vertical foundation cracking, and notes that, additionally, the appeal notes that the trees have previously damaged sewer pipes. However, no reports accompanied these receipts, invoice statements, or the quote from the termite inspector, so it's really not clear to staff what caused this damage to the foundation. as well as the sewer line damage. The appeal also notes diminished use of the front yard due to the roots, both the extent of them and the size of them, as well as limited sun exposure in regards to their solar panels. In order for the town to approve a tree removal permit, one or more of the findings in Town Code Section 2910-0992 must be made. Based on the report and the appeal packet, it appears that findings 4, economic enjoyment of the property, 5, utility service interference, or 6, imminent damage, are most applicable to this case. Based on the discussion provided in the staff report, staff recommends that the commission consider the appeal. If the commission feels the appeal can be granted, the approval should make one of those required findings in the Town Code section just referenced with the recommended conditions of approval in Exhibit 3. And this concludes staff's presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Safdie. Are there any questions by commissioners of staff at this time? I have one question. The 15-foot distance was determined how?
The arborist went out to the site. Actually, I met him there as well. And although we did not measure, it seemed to be roughly 15 to 20 feet from the actual wall of the house where the foundation is underneath to those trees. The covered porch was closer to 8 feet.
I see. Okay, thank you for that. And so we'll now open the public portion of the public hearing and give the applicant and appellant an opportunity to address the commission for up to 5 minutes. And we have a card from Mr. and Mrs. Haley. And you may both speak, but there's a 5-minute limit for the total presentation.
Hi, my name is Kim Haley. Thank you very much. When I bought the property in 1979, the 2 trees were about this big around and were not even up to the eave of the house. They seemed pretty fine then, but over the years, these trees have grown to be quite large. If any of you have seen them, they're huge. And one of the problems that we end up with is that there's a point at which the size of the trees has outgrown the lot. I mean, a redwood tree is a huge tree, and there's 2 of them right next to each other. At this point, it's made our front yard pretty unusable. It's a nasty environment to be in. We had a little bit of wind the other day, and I spent a half an hour just raking up all the droppings from the tree. There's roof damage, obviously, from all the stuff landing on the roof. So there's a point at which you have to say, could the town be better served if we replace these 2 trees with some smaller trees which are more appropriate for this lot size? And we're willing to, do the replacements as per the town. I think it would be, at this point, these trees are getting older in their age. There will be a point at which remediation has to be done. It just can't be structurally pruned forever. I mean, these trees are huge. They're not necessarily good for the street right now, because if you drive down the street, our house, when I did the remodel right after Loma Prieta, was one of the nicest looking houses on the block. Today it looks like a blight. There's not much we can do about it, but we would like to make our environment livable, and I think that we can work with the town to come up with a way to do that. In addition, to remove the trees, we've talked with a tree removal service who has said that they have found a company in Ben Lomond who will take the tree trunks and turn them into lumber. So we can be pretty environmentally successful, I think, in doing a removal that benefits everyone. One other item is that Nico and the rest of the family pretty much are allergic to the tree pollen. And when I moved out, 15, 20 years ago, we got to the point where we couldn't stand the pollen anymore. So it's just a mess at this point. They're not exactly the best tree for the location. So I'd like to see if there's a way that we can work with the town to come up with a better solution than the one we have right now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Stand by for possible questions from commissioners. Commissioner Burnett.
Thank you for coming. So, yeah, I did go down the street, and I noticed that on the street, there's many houses. I would say 50 to 60% of the homes have a large tree on the lot. So it seems like a tree-filled street. So with your home, and I did look at the 2 trees there, and by the way, I do have probably, I've been told my redwood tree is the tallest redwood tree in Los Gatos. I mean, it is gigantic. And I've been working with that tree for years, adjusting the pavement, and it does the really cleaning up your other tree and maybe even topping it a little bit so that you still have a tree, but it's not the tree I think that you're concerned about, which you feel is breaking up the pavement there.
A good point. We've had those 2 trees trimmed regularly over the years. Not so much in the last 7 years. But when I talked to arborist about that very problem, he said, these trees are twins at this point. That if you remove one, the other one has a much higher probability of being knocked over in a storm because of the way the roots are grown. And if we take the one that's upwind, obviously that's towards the south, the direction the winds come when they come in December, which they will, that would be removing the foundation roots that would keep the remaining tree from falling over. So and the problem also is that we used to have 3 Eodoras that lined between our house and Manuel Contreras next door, who incidentally is 100 years old. One of those Eodoras in a windstorm about 10 years ago fell over and hit his house. So we've had some worked examples, but again, they are scary when the winds come, and I don't believe there's any halfway approach that the arborists would recommend.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Other questions, Mr. Haley? Commissioner Hanson.
Thank you for your presentation. We also have 3 redwood trees on our property, and they've they're not close to our house, but they've done damage to our driveway, and we've had to repair it multiple times. So I'm sympathetic to hearing, what you've talked about. What I'm wondering is, the town has this tree ordinance, and this is our law, and it clearly you've had some foundation work. Why don't you go get a foundation company to say the trees are causing imminent, damage to the foundation? Because seems to be the missing piece here, is that we don't have anything other than your word. Well, and receipts from people, but it doesn't prove that the foundation damage was due to the tree.
Well, the foundation damage that was remediated 7 years ago required 9 hydraulic jacks to be installed, and the guy said it was because of the trees out front.
Well, he might have said that, but we don't have anything from them that says that. So, I mean, it's hard for us to give a variance from an ordinance when you don't have that, and you clearly paid for the foundation work. I mean, you could get someone to come out and say this is a problem versus it being your word. That would seem to satisfy the ordinance. Do you have an objection to doing that?
Well, we can play this game for as long as you want, but I don't think it's so if we get an engineer who comes out and says that, this just continues on. I really feel like I want to, we've presented our case, and if we need to go get more engineering done, that's certainly a possibility, but I don't see that gains us a whole bunch.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions of the appellant? Commissioner Thomas.
Mr. Haley, thank you for coming and speaking with us tonight. And I think I just have some follow-up, from Commissioner Hanson's comments. The town has, I know that the town has a pretty robust tree ordinance, and I understand that as citizens of Los Gatos, we all appreciate the trees, and we have a lot of heritage trees. And so I think that my question for you is just really a follow-up to Commissioner Hansen, and the fact that because of the way that our tree ordinance is written, in order for us to grant any sort of, grant your appeal tonight, we really need to be able to legally make these findings that there is damage being done to your property. It's causing major economic burden. And I truly do appreciate that what you've told us and the evidence that thus far that you have presented us with. But my question is, if we don't feel like we have enough evidence to make one of these specific findings that Mr. Safdie highlighted about the tree ordinance, would you be willing to have an inspection done that would be able to have proof of that? Because I think that that's what we sympathize with you. And, my neighbor has 2 redwood trees, and she's always concerned about them falling down. They seem to be about the same age as yours. And I understand, but would you be willing to get an inspection so that we can soundly make those findings?
Well, let me read to you out of the tree removal requirements for the town of Los Gatos. The town of Los Gatos is forested by many native and non-native trees and contains individual trees of great beauty. Trees contribute significantly to the value of land in the town. It is intent in the town code to regulate the removal of trees within the town in order to retain as many trees as possible, consistent with the purpose of the code and the reasonable use of private property. Now, these trees I have owned and maintained for over 50 years. And there's a point at which they've served their purpose. And I don't believe at this point that the trees are adding a lot of value to the street. To people who are familiar with the housing and pricing and real estate in our neighborhood, has said, well, it's probably knocking a couple $100,000 off the value of your house, because they would have to be removed if we wanted to sell the house. So it's either going to be me or someone else, but those trees are not going to be, they don't make sense. When I went to build a house, I remember going in front of the Planning Commission, and I heard over and over again that the size of the house was going to be dependent on the size and mass of the house on the parcel. And I know that you guys are very familiar with this. So, there's a point at which, would you really want me building a 10-story apartment on that property? Of course not. It doesn't make sense. But 120-foot tall trees right in front of your house don't make a lot of sense either.
Well, Mr. Haley, I think you've answered the question from the commissioner, and I'll ask if there are any other questions of you. There's a discrepancy in the staff report about the distance of the trees to your home, and it may be the front porch versus the front plane of the home. But can you explain what the distance is to the actual face of the home?
Well, the beams that are part of the second story extend over the covered porch. They are part of the foundation of the second story as well. So that's what we said. The extent of the house is within 8 feet of those trees. So.
Okay, thank you for that. And have you had any experience with actual falling branches from those trees?
On occasion, as a matter of fact, there's one that was laying there just recently. So yeah, there's some branches that have come down. But again, I have to say, the trees are not unhealthy, but they don't really fit. They don't really fit the location anymore. They've grown, and they've grown out of control.
So I'll ask you one final question. 2 of the commissioners have asked you In effect, if we continue this hearing, would you be willing to bring evidence of the foundation damage from an appropriately qualified individual?
Well, if you want to continue this, we can, but to me, my main point is that, yes, there is foundation damage. We've had to have it remediated in the past, and we presented bills of that work that had to be done. I don't know what else we need to do. Of course, we can get a whole staff of people. We can hire them and have them say almost anything, but...
Okay, I think you've responded to the question. Anything further? Commissioner Thomas.
My follow-up question is just about the trees that you were planning on, or if you had even talked to Mr. Safdie or the town yet, or the arborist, on what trees you wanted to replace them with.
I haven't talked with Ryan, and I would look forward to that.
Okay.
And as I understand the town code, is that the replacement is replacing with some number of trees. Not all of those trees have to be on the property. They could be located on other properties. So we are willing to work with the town to come up with the best possible solution.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time and presentation. And we'll now invite comments on this item from members of the public. Do we have anyone on Zoom tonight?
I do not see any hands raised for
Thank
this
you.
item.
And I don't have any card. Did anyone from the public want to speak on this issue? Okay, if not, we can turn to the commissioners and see if they have any comments.
Through the chair, the applicant appellant does have an additional 3 minutes if he wishes to make a closing statement.
Okay, well, do you wish to speak further on the matter?
Go ahead.
Since there's no public comments? Okay. So we will close the public portion of the public hearing and ask if commissioners have questions of staff, wish to comment on the appeal, or introduce a motion. Commissioner Burnett first, and then Commissioner Janoff.
Yes, thank you. Can I ask a question of the arborist? Is here tonight? Yes, hi. Thank you. In your profession, if you removed one of the trees, would it actually damage the other tree?
Well, it would only damage the other tree if they ground the stump, if they did a big grinding of the stump. Then you're going to start hitting roots of the other tree.
Thank you.
Anything further for commissioners in the way of thoughts? Commissioner Janoff, yes.
Thank you. You know, I'm really sympathetic to this situation. I drove up and down the street. I thought I had the wrong address. I'm like, where is this house? And I couldn't see the house because I could only see trees. It's remarkable how much these two trees obscure the property, obscure the house, and prevent, in my reading of the property, prevent use of the front yard of the property. It's filled with roots and it's filled with trees and tree debris. And redwoods are not necessarily the safest trees to have near structures. Limbs do fall. And so I think even though we have an ordinance that is the town law, there is an opportunity to take into consideration item number 4 under the particular zone, code section 29.10-0992, and that says that the existence of the trees prevents or restricts the economic enjoyment of the property or creates an unusual hardship. I think together with the concern over the allergies, there's no doubt in my mind whether or not we've got an engineering report that there may not be foundational damage caused by the tree, but there's almost certainly going to be sewer lines and plumbing line. It just happens when you've got trees of this size. It's going to disrupt your plumbing. It's happened to us many times, and so I am sympathetic to that. So I would be in favor of granting the appeal on the basis of item number 4 of this zone code.
Thank you for those comments. Commissioner Raspy?
Thank you, Chair. First, I'm going to agree in general with Commissioner Janoff. I also believe that this is a situation where, again, we're trying to preserve as many trees as we can in the town of Los Gatos. That doesn't mean we preserve every tree. There are circumstances where some, by necessity, have to be removed. Commissioner Janoff referenced subsection 4 of 29.10.0992 regarding the economic interference with the property, but I would also rely upon subsection 6, which says that the tree has caused or may imminently cause significant damage. Again, we don't know for sure whether the tree has caused current foundation damage, but a tree that size, I think we can all imagine a scenario under which, if it's not causing underground damage, there could be a falling portion of that tree that could cause damage to property or persons, and I'd like to avoid that situation. So I would be in favor of granting the appeal with the caveat that as part of, I think, condition 3 of the conditions of approval, which requires the replanting of trees, that there be some semi-mature trees placed on that property. I don't want an empty front yard. I think there should be some replacement of the trees that will continue the theme throughout the street of a tree-lined street. So those are my thoughts.
Commissioner Clark and then Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. I have two questions. One is for the arborist. I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what structural pruning would look like for these trees.
Yeah, what it would do is it would open these trees up, so when we do have wind events, instead of them acting as a sail, they act as a sieve. And that's, it lets the wind go through the tree as opposed to against the tree. So obviously there's less force.
Okay, and would that also help with issues like the solar panels, or would they not be able to be pruned to that extent?
Yeah, I didn't really look at that.
Okay.
That was not part of my inspection.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is for staff. I was just wondering if you can elaborate on the replacement policy, like how many trees would need to be planted to replace these ones?
Certainly, and actually, the planning manager is pulling up the code. We know it's going to be a minimum of 4 15-gallon trees. To correct a statement made previously, they do have to all be on site, or you have to pay in lieu fees for the replacements. But we do base the replacement ratio on the canopy size. So if you give me a minute, I can tell you exactly how many trees. Okay, thank you. So it'd be 6 15-gallon trees would be required to replace on this property.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Thomas?
Thank you, Chair. I have a follow-up question to Commissioner Clark's, and that is if, could we hear what the definition is of a heritage tree in town? It's in, sorry, I know it's like right there in there too.
Thank you for that question. So this is considered a protected tree. It's not considered a large protected tree or a heritage tree.
Okay.
Heritage tree is something that needs to be designated specifically.
Okay, so the definition of the large of a protected tree?
So this is considered a protected tree, and it's based on the size of the tree, the diameter, as well as there are more restrictive thresholds if the tree is on a site that's subject to a current development application. So since there is no development on the site at the moment, it is actually a larger size, but this still triggers that requirement for protected tree removal.
Okay. And then, so that is where the number and gallon size comes from with combined with the current canopy coverage. So would we be able to change the finding? Is that legal for us to say you have to plant new trees in the front yard?
I don't believe that would be an issue. As this is before the Planning Commission, you can add conditions if you feel fit.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hanson?
Sorry, I have a question for the town arbor, or a couple of questions for the town arborist. What is the in your professional opinion, what is the likelihood that these trees would actually fall, especially compared to all the eucalyptus trees right there?
That's a tough question to answer. I think if I could answer that, I'd be feeding the multitudes. So, let's put it this way. They didn't fall through that event that we just went through. So they're strong. I mean, I don't, if I can make an aside, I think that there should be a private arborist come in and do a report on those trees. They may, if there's root problems, they may be able to be mitigated. I don't know, but I don't have the ability to look that deep into it when I go out to do a site visit.
Okay.
Okay, so I just look at I couldn't look at foundation damage or anything like that, so it's very superficial what I do. But I think that it would behoove you to have someone, before two trees that beautiful come out, someone needs to look at them. And if a private arborist says, hey, this has to happen, I don't think we'd stand in the way of it.
Okay. And you could just confirm that these are native to the area, would be found here naturally, and...
Yeah, they're coastal redwoods, and we're right on the edge.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
I mean, we have lots.
Okay. So you are, just to confirm, you are not concerned about like the relative safety of these trees right now. I understand that they're very tall, and we have a lot of tall trees in town, and it can be probably scary to have the tallest one in your yard, and they sway, but they live how long?
Longer than us.
Yeah.
Years, actually. Okay. So, yeah, and I also, topping them is not an option.
Yeah.
If you top them, you make bigger problems. So just so we're on the same on that. Okay,
thank you. So I do have a couple of comments just to follow up.
Please proceed.
With my questions. I also really, really, truly sympathize with the applicant, and I completely understand where other commissioners are coming from, but I think that we just updated our tree ordinance to have better teeth for enforcement for people that that illegally remove trees, not that are coming through this process, but for this very reason, to make sure that we are very thorough. And I just don't feel like I can make the same findings that other commissioners have mentioned so far, because I haven't seen an inspection, and I just feel like I need more proof to be comfortable with making those findings, especially after hearing what the arborist has to say and considering that the trees are healthy at this moment. I do agree that they're a burden, but in some ways, but we have trees all over town that are a burden that we don't remove. So, and I understand. I have oak trees, which drop a lot all the time. So I get the yard work component and the roof and all of the stuff, but I just think that in order to make any of those findings, I just need more proof from an inspection or a realtor at least, or another arborist coming out and saying that there's structural damage happening. It would impact the sale of the house by a lot. And I don't think that's too much of a huge economic ask to ask for that. So that's where I'm at right now.
Thank you. Commissioner Hanson?
I have a question for the town arborist as well. My question is, when you come out to do an inspection, this was the result of the request to take down the trees. Would you consider item 4 looking at maybe not economic utility per se, but how does this? Are other people in the neighborhood in the same situation? Is that something that you would look at that was related to item 4, or is that too nebulous for an arborist to evaluate? It basically says the tree restricts the economic enjoyment of the property, but in a manner typically not experienced by owners of similarly situated properties. So, are there multiple other houses on that street that don't have redwood trees do you look at that when you make your determination?
No, I don't. When I go out, there's the things I look at is the tree dead, diseased, dying, an imminent hazard, or causing property damage. Now, when I went out there, there's some like paving stones that are being lifted up. That's not something that is going to trigger a removal permit. Those are replaceable. Driveways, replaceable. But when you're talking about house damage, if in fact that tree's causing problems, I don't even bat an eyelash. So, I mean, because it's his home.
But you didn't find any damage or any proof of that if there was damage that it was caused by the trees?
Absolutely not. Not to the home.
Okay, thank you. If I may, I would like to make a comment then. I'm in the same situation as Commissioner Thomas. I live on a property where we have 3 redwood trees. I do know the damage that they can cause, at least from the driveway perspective. I suspect that these trees have caused foundation damage, but we don't have any evidence of that other than someone came out to repair the foundation. There are also many other reasons why foundations might need to be repaired. So I think it's when you look at 2 very healthy trees that have no issues whatsoever, and our arborist is saying that they're not coming down anytime soon, it's hard to make for me to make any of these findings without expert testimony to that effect. And I think that the evidence is probably there. It's just we don't have the expert saying those things. So I can't support granting of the appeal.
Thank you. Commissioner Janov.
Thank you. Well, I suspect I'm still in the minority here, but I would add that my concern is not, I do appreciate that these are large and beautiful trees. There's no question about that. But I also appreciate that they are problematic for the homeowner's use of their own property, particularly the front yard. They also obscure the home in such a way that it's possible that structural pruning or other forms of tree pruning could open up the trees so that you could see the home behind, but at present, you just don't. And when I drove the street, I was looking for, once I found the house and understood the problem, in my view, I went back and forth looking at the houses along the street to see, does anyone else on the street, A, have redwoods, and B, in this particular fashion where it's closer to the home and completely obstructing the home. What I found was, yes, there are homes on the street that have redwood trees, but they are not in the front yard like you would have a more decorative tree, more toward the front corner of the properties, more toward the back side of the properties. I didn't see any others, I may be mistaken, but I didn't see any others that had this particular configuration, which to me reads as a problem. I appreciate that the trees are there. I have oak trees. I've got redwood trees. I've got damage from trees. I understand. If it's the will of the commission to seek a report from the property owners that demonstrates with any kind of certainty that these trees are causing damage to the plumbing, damage to the foundation, damage to the roof, damage to anything, if that's the will of the commission, and it would not be my personal recommendation, I would recommend that we not continue this item. We let that we approve the appeal based on presentation of a report sufficient that staff can make a determination. It doesn't seem fair to have this homeowner come back to us. There's no doubt that the report would be favorable to removing the trees. So I would not want them to continue to prolong this process. So if we can't agree that there's sufficient reason to grant an appeal tonight, then I would just suggest that we not continue it, but make a motion that would include the requirement for a report and let staff be determinant from there going forward.
So I think that sounds like a motion, and we can get some discussion based on a motion. Please.
Just to confirm, I'm making an assumption about how the motion would go. Actually, what I guess I should do is make a motion to approve the appeal on the basis of they're meeting the criteria for item number 4 of code 29.10.0992. And if I can co-opt Commissioner Raspi's item number 6 as well.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? Commissioner Raspi.
I'll second that motion. Just one caveat and perhaps add on. I had the requirement of certain semi-mature trees as part of the planting obligation. If we could, I don't know the wording we want to use on that, or if you want to leave it to town arborists, but to make sure that we have adequate replacements in the front yard.
I would agree that we have adequate replacements, but as to the size and number, I would leave that to staff to determine.
That's fair. Thank you.
Okay.
I second the motion as presented.
So we have a motion and a second, and we'll have discussion. Commissioner Burnett.
Yes, I would not support the recommendation to not come back to the Planning Commission. I would like an arborist I would recommend an arborist to come out and check the tree for its health and vitality and just give a thorough report on the tree. I also would like the arborist to make comments on how to maintain the trees and keep them healthy, and if there'd be a possibility to remove one of them without jeopardizing the second tree on the inner. So those are my feelings. I would not support the.
I just want to remind the commission
Jones.
that we have a motion on the floor, and the topic of discussion was not part of that motion.
So is there other discussion from commissioners about the motion? Commissioner Hanson.
Since the applicant didn't seem to be willing to get the expert testimony, particularly with regard to item 6, I think item 4 is a lot squishier in terms of being having solid evidence that would really support it. And item 6 is really the root cause and is really the most serious thing that we can look at. And it seems that as though, based on reports from the applicant, that there is the case that there's been damage from those trees, but we just don't have an expert saying that. What I'm concerned about is turning it over to staff, to the applicant and staff, when the applicant has already said they don't want to go through that process. I feel like we're going to be in an impasse. I'm going to ask a question of staff regarding this motion. If the appeal was denied and the applicant was able to come forward with the evidence that the damage was caused, to the foundation or the sewer lines was caused by the trees, wouldn't you be able to approve their application anyways?
That is my take. However, the planning department doesn't usually see tree removal permits. We only get involved when it's related to a development application or if it's appealed. So ultimately, that would be up to the town arborist.
So I'd like to follow up with the town arborist. If the commission were to not grant the appeal and they weren't able to remove the trees, would they be able to come back to you without coming to the planning commission and present adequate evidence that proves that there is damage coming from the trees to the foundation and or the sewer line?
Yes.
Okay, because you're the person that would make that determination.
Yeah, because I do this a lot with people. When I go out, if I have questions, I ask them to get an arborist report. That's the first thing I ask, because I know how this town is, and if trees start coming out, we get it. We hear about it. But when it's documented, it's huge. I mean, we don't stand in the way of that. I can tell you that.
Okay. So that being said, I would not be in favor of granting the appeal. I would rather make the denial, and the applicant still has the recourse of going and getting this information without coming back to the planning commission and getting their trees removed. Commissioner Thomas.
I have a follow-up question to staff about this suggestion. I just want to confirm, if we deny it, it goes back to the arborist, or would the appeal then go up to town council?
I think the idea there was deny this tree removal permit. If and when the property owners decide to go get one of these reports, whether it's a structural engineering report or consulting arborist report, they would submit a brand new tree removal permit,
Okay.
of which the town arborist would support.
Okay. Which would mean that they would have to pay another fee for a new application.
Yes,
Yes.
that's if, I don't know if usually when we deny this, we refund them half of the fee.
Yeah.
And now I don't know if that's happened. If it has happened, then they have to reapply.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, so my follow-up, I guess, would be just if we did issue a continuance and that evidence was presented, would you, as a town arborist, be able to make a new recommendation to us as a planning commission that we could follow up on? So
well, sure.
The application wouldn't have to start over again, essentially.
Well, we could forward it to you, but, once this has all been documented, it's pretty much a formality from my end. So, we've documented it, okay, now we move forward with it. I don't think it would have to come back to you, at least not in this setting.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we're avoiding like doubling any reapplication fees and all of that in a way that, and not like creating extra work for staff too. Just whatever seems to be the most streamlined course, I feel like, and least requirement of financial input would be suggested. So that's what I would support, whatever that is.
All right, we have a motion on the table. Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. Sorry that I've been quiet. I'm really torn on this item because on one hand, when I did my site visit, I looked at those trees and I was like, those are really big trees really close to a house, but they're also really beautiful trees that have been there for a long time. And I really love about Los Gatos are trees. And I think if everybody who had a tree this big then wanted to remove it, we'd have a huge problem on our hands. And so I just think, I want to be very thorough with the findings and make sure that we are really sure that we have a good reason before taking down these beautiful trees. So for me, the more I've thought about it, I think that I would want to know that there is confirmed foundation damage, just to be fair to the trees, to other people who have trees this big on their property and things like that. So I would be in favor of denying the application and assuming that they will find that the foundation's being damaged and that it wouldn't have to come back to Planning Commission.
Anything further? Commissioner Raspy?
Just one comment to the motion that's on the floor. I think as presented, the motion contemplates the removal of the trees, not necessarily based on their condition, but on their economic impact on the lot. That is, they are preventing the full and best use of that property because they're so big and they're crowding the front yard out. So even if we suggest to the arborist or a third party to get a condition report, I'm not sure that changes the discussion wholeheartedly from what the motion is. The motion, I think, is the trees as they currently sit on the land with their size and location prevent any further beneficial use of the lot. And on that basis, there's an adequate means for the removal. And Commissioner Janoff, you're the maker of the motion, but I think that's where we are. So as we consider that, we can talk about getting further condition report, but I think the larger issue for this discussion is their situation and size on the lot. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Thomas.
So I have a question then for the maker of the motion and then supporter. If it's about number 4, what sort of economic enjoyment of the property or unusual hardship are you considering for the finding that you would have to make?
The maker of the motion would suggest that the entire front yard is of limited use, and that what we didn't discuss is the concern that the trees are also shadowing the solar panels and creating a lower effectiveness of those panels. And so as Vice Chair Raspy has stated, this isn't about the beauty of the trees. This is about the functionality of the lot for the owners, and so use of the front yard and effectiveness of the solar panels would be my assertion.
All right, maybe the chair can chime in. I think that we can make the findings under 2910-00924 and 6, and I need to be reminded as whether the motion covered both of those subsections. They did, okay. But I also believe that a reasonable way to proceed is to deny the motion and allow the appellants to reapply to the town. So the motion would be without prejudice to that. But we don't have that motion on the table, so I'll call the question and ask commissioners to raise their hand first in support of the motion. It looks like 3 in favor, and those opposed? It looks like 4. Okay, so the motion fails. Mr. Janoff.
So the purpose of the motion was to eliminate that question. And so I will approach a follow-up motion, which is to deny the appeal with the request that the appellant return to staff with evidence of an arborist report or an engineering report that indicates that the trees are creating problems for the foundation, the roof, the plumbing, whatever functional part of a normal house, not the driveway, not walkways, and that report be presented to staff as a new application for request of removal of the tree, and that the decision be with the town arborist as it would be normal procedure.
Thank you for the motion. Is there a second? Commissioner Clark.
I second the motion.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask those in favor to raise their hands. And that looks unanimous. So the motion passes. Thank you very much. Oh, and Ms. Narmer, are there appeal rights?
There are, thank you. The decision of the commission can be appealed to town council by any interested person as defined by Town Code Section 2910-020 within 10 days on forms available online with fees paid. Final deadline is 4 p.m. on the 10th day.
Thank you. So we'll now move on to item 3 on the agenda, which is a request for approval of demolition of one existing office and 4 residential buildings, construction of an assisted living and memory care facility, variances from the maximum height and lot coverage of the zone, merger of 4 lots into one, and removal of large protected trees on property zoned O, located at 15860 to 1894 Winchester Boulevard and 17484 Shelburne Way. The APNs are 529-11-013, 038, 039, and 040. Architecture and site application S-21-008. Conditional use permit application U-21-010. Variance application V-21-003. And subdivision application M-22-008. And mitigated negative declaration ND-22-001. Staff has noted that an additional study and mitigated negative declaration have been prepared for the project. And staff has recommended denial of the application, and we'll hear from Ms. Armour on that issue. The applicant, property owner is Green Valley Corporation, DBA Swenson. And may I show of hands from commissioners who have visited the property? That's unanimous. And are there any disclosures? I have one. In my law practice, I at one time represented University Oaks Condominium Association, which has submitted opposition to the proposed project, as well as some of its members. Per staff in my office, the last work was performed in 2008, but I believe there may have been other services closer to my retirement in 2020. I've given the matter significant thought, and I believe that I can act without prejudice in this matter. So having said that, Ms. Armour, you will be giving the staff report tonight.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. The item before you this evening is a proposal for a new assisted living facility at the corner of Winchester Boulevard and Shelburne Way. As just stated by the Chair, the request includes demolition of the existing buildings, a conditional use permit for the proposed use, a variance from the maximum height limit of 35 feet, a variance from the maximum lot coverage of 40%, and a merger of the 4 lots into one, including also removal of large protected trees. An initial study and mitigated negative declaration has been prepared as part of the required CEQA environmental review. The proposed project would create a new 3-story assisted living and memory care facility consisting of 107 assisted living units and 18 memory care units, with 54 parking spaces, most of which would be provided in a below-grade parking garage accessed off of Shelburne Way. As part of the process, a story pole exception was granted by Town Council, which required larger signage and a video simulation that was available online. Project complies with zoning with the exception of the 2 variances previously mentioned for heights up to 50 feet and lot coverage of 50%. The proposed use is permitted if approved through a conditional use permit. The town's consulting architect reviewed and was in support of the building design with no recommended changes. Environmental review, as I stated, was an initial study and mitigated negative declaration. The appendices did include transportation and arborist reports, among other reports. Some of you will remember the previous office project that was approved on the site in 2017. The proposed project does take into consideration the feedback and conditions that were applied to that project, as well as feedback received from the CDAC Conceptual Development Advisory Committee meeting in 2020 in designing this project. In addition, the applicant has worked with staff to provide required information and modify their proposal to address staff comments and reduce the extent of the variance request for height. Staff does not recommend approval of the variances currently requested, but if Planning Commission finds merit in the request, we would point you towards the required findings in Exhibit 3 and draft conditions of approval in Exhibits 4 and 5. Public comment were received and provided to you in the staff report, in an addendum, and in a desk item. They have been a mix of supportive comments and concerns about the proposed project. This evening, we have town staff from Planning and Public Works, as well as the town's transportation consultant, the town's environmental consultant, and the town attorney, all available to support your discussion. This concludes staff's presentation, but we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Armour. And do commissioners have questions? Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. I just have a quick question. I was wondering and I know that this is just part of the policy, not something we would be changing or anything, but the 40 to 50% lot coverage, what is the reasoning? I just felt like that's so little of the lot, like what's expected to be done with the rest of it, if that makes sense.
Thank you for that question. This is an interesting situation where the office land use designation in the general plan actually does list a maximum lot coverage of 50%. But in this case, the zoning is more restrictive for the office zone. It is 40%. And so in general, the other areas of the lot are used for landscaping, access, driveways, required setbacks. As you can see, that is what's proposed in this site for the area that isn't considered lot coverage.
And is the reasoning for the limitation just kind of massing overall?
Generally in zoning, yes. Okay. That it has to do with making sure that there is a certain amount of spacing between buildings and green space and other kind of open space in terms of the feel of the community.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hanson.
We recently went through the process of updating our general plan, and that's the land use portion of that, as well as community design, are on hold as the 2020 plan for the time being. my recollection is in the 2020 general plan, the highest height we have for any zone is 45 feet. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And is there any building on Winchester Boulevard that's more than 35 feet?
We do have some buildings that exceed that, I believe. I'm trying to remember what the height of the Netflix building is. I don't know that number off the top of my head, but that I believe is the tallest building in that area.
But Netflix was a planned development
That is correct.
at the northern part of Winchester.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Raspi.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Ms. Armour, for your excellent presentation. Two quick questions. First, I think you indicated we are getting 107 proposed assisted living units and then 18 units for memory care. That's correct? Do some or all of these count toward our housing numbers for the town?
Thank you. The proposed project is considered commercial in terms of the use on an office zone. However, because of the way that these units are proposed with individual kitchens, I believe, based on current state law, we do believe that the 107 would count towards our housing production required by the town's housing element.
Great, thank you. And one follow-up question, if I may, Chair.
Sure.
I noticed some of the comments referenced driving studies, and I think indicated that perhaps we had used or relied on an older dated study. Can you respond to that?
Thank you. And we do, if there are more detailed questions in the future, we do have the consultants who prepared the 2021 study, but the study that was the basis for the environmental review and our analysis of the project was conducted in 2021, not the 2016. The 2016 report was mentioned because it was previously conducted for development on the site, but that was the basis for the previous office proposal approval. So.
Thanks so much.
Commissioner Janoff?
Got two questions. When I looked at the attachment, or the Exhibit 1, it was dated 2022, and that's the current traffic study that was brought to our attention in the amendment, or addendum. Can you comment that the addendum comment, just in summary, was that the 2022 report was based on a 2016 ITE versus when there was a 2021 ITE guideline available. Can you comment on that?
Thank you for that question. I actually will pass that off to Mike Roman, our senior traffic engineer, who's with us on Zoom. Mike, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and answer that question if you're able, or pass it on to our consultants from TJKM, that's up to you.
Good evening, commissioners. The report looked at the ITE trip generation manual, the 10th edition, which I believe was replaced by the 11th in the fall of 2021. So at the time of the report, I believe it was current. It was the 10th edition. Now there's a new one, but TJKM did a quick analysis earlier today, and the 11th edition actually has a reduction in the AM. In the 10th edition, there were 16 trips into the site, 10 trips out, for a total of 26 trips in the morning peak hour. In the PM peak hour, there was 13 in, 22 out, for a total of 35. Compared to the 11th IT trip generation manual, there's 14 in the AM going in, 10 coming out, for a total of 24. So there's a net reduction of 2 fewer trips based on the IT 11th edition. And in the PM, it's 12 in, 20 out, and 32 total. So that's actually a reduction of 3. So materially, it doesn't make any difference at all in the analysis of the report or the individual. If anything, it might reduce it to a very slight amount because there's slightly fewer trips, both in the AM and the PM. But once again, that was the current edition at the time the report was done. Now we're using the 11th edition.
Thank you. And I have one other question for staff.
Thank you. Other questions of staff?
Yes. Ms. Armour, you said you believe that the 107 units would be counted toward the RENA numbers. Either through further explanation, or perhaps the town attorney could clarify if they actually will. And the reason I pursue this question is, it seems to me that when we were considering a senior community not in distant past, that the answer was no, that they did not count toward our arena. So I want to be absolutely sure rather than maybe.
Thank you for that question and the opportunity to clarify. Yes, we are counting these towards our arena allocation. They are actually currently listed as pending project units in the draft housing element, and we do expect to be able to count them. Over the last few years, this has been a question as to whether this type of unit does get counted, but the most recent information that we have received is that they would. The town attorney is available on Zoom in case she'd like to add something to this.
That's correct. And then I do recall that there was also a discussion as to whether or not the town could impose its BMR or below market rate unit requirement on these residential units. And I recall that we concluded that the town could not do that.
Response to the question? Other questions from staff? Commissioner Burnett?
Yes, thank you. So one of the letters that came in mentioned that wondering if actually, and from staff, should this area be changed in zone from an office zone to an RM zone based on the fact that it's no longer office space but residential? It was brought up in one of the comments from a
Thank you for that
neighbor.
question. Yeah, thank you for that question. The use that is being considered here is allowed with a conditional use permit, whether this is a lot is zoned office or if it's zoned multifamily. There are actually, I believe, at least 5 different zones in which this is allowed, but in all cases it requires a conditional use permit. So a change in zoning does not actually affect the process for approving this use on this site.
Thank you.
Other questions? There'll be further opportunities later. Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question for the town attorney. I was wondering if you could say why the town is unable to impose the BMR requirements on this.
I'd have to get back to the commission with that information because it was research that we did about a year ago, and I'm not remembering the details about the BMR requirement, but I can provide that to the commission in the future.
Okay, thank you.
And through the chair, I could add, I believe that was based on the fact that this is not considered a residential use. It is considered commercial, and the BMR requirement is based on residential uses. We can confirm that if needed, but that is my memory of those conversations.
Thank you for that. Well, I think we're ready to open the public portion of the public hearing and give the applicant an opportunity to address the commission for up to 5 minutes. And we have a card from the applicant, Mr. Bristow. Thank you.
Good evening. I just want to make sure the presentation's ready before the clock starts. So, thank you. Okay. Are you ready? Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is Jesse Bristow with Swenson Builders. I'm a development project manager for this project. Along with me is my colleague David Meads, who's our senior VP of architecture, and he's here for any questions after the presentation. And I do apologize, I do have to move quickly because I only have 5 minutes. First of all, I do want to say thank you for allowing us to be here tonight. I also want to thank staff for getting us to this point. So on this slide, what I'd just like to highlight is that we reached out to the town council, University Oaks neighbors, and we went to the CDAC when we first thought about this project in 2020. And we asked the same question of all 3 parties. We said, hey, would you prefer a mixed use or a 100% apartment project, or would you prefer a senior care facility? And the consensus was a senior care facility. And the University Oaks neighbors actually expressed that they didn't want to be next to an apartment building. So that's the direction we took. And the CDAC also said that they would like to see Mediterranean architecture. There was other outreach, but I can go into detail later. Next slide, please. So I just want to highlight, we first submitted in April 2021 after all the feedback that we got. We were deemed complete in July 2022, and all of that, as staff said, was making adjustments to the project to try to make it as conforming as possible. We already discussed about kind of the reason why we're going for that 50% lot coverage variance. That is the general plan. The general plan is a progressive document. It's what you want to see your town build out to in the next 15, 20 years. So, and it is a better efficiency of the site for this, for our proposed use. The height request, we do have a sloping lot, and so it makes this challenging for our project to meet this height at 35 feet. If you look at the building at the top of plate, not including the mansard roof, the building is actually trying to meet as much as possible. On the frontage of Winchester, we are, but on Shelburne, we're not. And we can highlight that later. We also have the mansard roof to shield mechanical equipment and solar equipment. Next slide, please. So when we first presented this project, we have 3 wings, and all 3 wings were 3 stories. And the south wing that was closest to the University Oaks neighbors was 3 stories. And after meeting with them, they said, hey, can you step it down? Can you scoot it back? And can you provide more vegetation? So we went from 3 stories to 20 stories, and we lost about 10 units on that floor. I actually think it was 15. And we went from a 10-foot setback to a 15-foot setback, and we added vegetation. We made sure that there'd be plenty of that for privacy on both sides. Next slide, please. In here, this is in the plan set. The highlighted yellow is the area and variance that we're asking for. And there's a blue line. It's in the plans. I apologize. It's hard to see on the screen. But originally we had the back of the building on the top floor where those umbrellas are. Those actually went all the way back. So we stepped in that building, and we went from a double corridor to a single corridor, and we lost 10 units there. So we really tried to step in the building to try to meet this variance as much as possible. We know we're not meeting it all the way, but we did make a concerted effort. Next slide, please. And just quickly, if I could just highlight, this is the south elevation for University Oaks. So on the left side, that frontage of that 2-story building, on the building top plate, not including the mansard roof, is 23 feet. All the way back is 33 feet. So if we eliminate the mansard roof and expose the equipment, this project is conforming of what would be next to the neighbors. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so one thing I just really want to highlight, there was a comment in the University Oaks letter saying that, hey, there's no middle ground. You know, the developer didn't provide a middle ground. And I think that's the confusion. This project is the middle ground. We're proposing something that we think is low intensive use. The users are self-contained. They have everything they need. They're of an older age, so they're not going to be disturbing. There's less traffic impacts as discussed. And we're really trying to propose a project that the town can be proud of and is higher end. Excuse me. The alternative is SB 6 or AB 2011. And so those went into effect in July 2023. And anything that is zoned office or commercial can be 100% residential. So based on where Los Gatos is, in the metropolitan area of Santa Clara, you can build up to 60 units per acre. We have 1.31 acres, so that's 78 units. Rounded up to 80, that's not including a density bonus where we can get a 50% increase. That would be 120 units. And when you apply a density bonus, you can break the height. So we would pursue another path if we don't have this option. We would build something bigger, we'd build something taller. When you build bigger apartment units, that would be more impactful. And the neighbors specifically said they didn't want to be next to an apartment unit. So with that, that's just the final point I'd really like to make. And we really appreciate your time, and I can answer any questions. Thank you.
Can you stand by for questions, which I'm sure we'll have from commissioners? Commissioner Hanson.
We have a good number of letters of opposition. There are a few in support, but I would say the preponderance is letters of opposition from the very neighbors that you said that you've spoken to. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering if you could comment on what kind of discussions and why are we seeing this much opposition? Now, I will preface that with it is very common with large developments. I've been doing this for a number of years, that it's at the very end after people realize that it might be approved that sure. People will be making comments. But since you just met with them in August, what was discussed at that meeting and what is the outcome of that? Because here we're sitting with all these letters of we
Sure.
We don't want this.
Yes. So I think the frustration with the neighbors is that we met with them at the end of 2020, and then from then we started to design our project, and that's when we submitted to staff. So we met with them initially before the CDAC. We met with them with that proposal, and they said, hey, can you step it in, step it back? And that's what we did. Now, if they approved of that, we wanted to keep moving forward with the town and planning staff and make sure we can keep our application going and still be able to, hopefully meet the standards of what the neighbors expected. We had an individual meeting with one member of the University Oaks with staff on the call where, after we submitted our first submittal, they basically went through line by line what they did not like about the project. So it just felt, kind of regardless of what we did, they weren't going to be happy with the project. And there's some letters that say, hey, we would be okay with a one-story building or a two-story building. Well, the section that's next to them is 2 stories, but still it's the other part of the project to have a functional facility, I think they're going to find challenging.
Did you share with them in this most recent meeting that the part of the building that was closest to them is actually 2 stories?
Yes, and so it has been a long road, and when we were originally going to come to the Planning Commission in October or November of 2022, and when we put up those story poles, we didn't get any feedback regarding those story poles. I understand that there was an expectation to have more outreach, but again, no one reached out to us. And so we went over the completed package with what we were proposing, and I just said, hey, just want to let you guys know we're going to the Planning Commission. Did you have any questions, any concerns? I think some people that live further south on University Oaks away from the project aren't as concerned about it, but I think people that live a little bit closer in their development are very concerned about it, and rightfully so. We are going to be neighbors.
So the follow-up question, the specific comment about people, looking into windows, you mentioned that you had increased the setback and there would be screening trees.
Yes.
So, is there a way that you are able to demonstrate to them is it going to be possible for people to look into each other's windows?
I think any much as anyone, neighbor in a 2-story home, if you're next to your neighbor, but, people have landscaping, people have trees, people have blinds, and mind you, the average age in these facilities are 83. So, even if they do want to look out the window, I'm not sure if they're going to be able to see very far. But again, I think there can be privacy effects that can calm some people's nerves.
And you're committed to putting in those privacy screenings, like plantings and that kind of thing, to make sure that there isn't people looking into each other's windows?
Yes, absolutely. And, I believe the request was to have evergreen trees, so when the seasons change, they're still full. So, if there's a need to add lattices or something of that nature along the separation wall, I think we could adjust our landscaping plan.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Other questions of Mr. Bristow? Commissioner
Janoff.
I apologize. There's something,
We have an ongoing issue.
kind of a mental block with Commissioner Janoff.
A couple of questions. Although we received a number of comments, concerns from University Oaks, we also received concerns from other neighbors. Can you describe the extent of your neighborhood outreach in talking to not just University Oaks, but to the broader neighborhood about the project?
Sure. So I think directly across from Winchester is actually an office building. I think Stanford had a medical office out there, right across the street. So we didn't have any. They didn't have any concerns, and there was no communication. So we assumed that was okay. Directly next to us, the veterinarian, we reached out to them, and they were excited to see something, a new change. They are backed up to, I think, an older portion of the property. And we didn't have any communication with anyone directly across on the corner. We did have communication from the adjacent neighbor, who I think you're all familiar with, and he expressed his concerns in that he would only support our project if it was the same size as the original office that was approved in 2017. So that was the extent of our outreach.
Something further, Commissioner Jennings?
For the neighbors.
If I could just follow up. So just to confirm, you did not do any outreach to the neighbors, not the business across the street, but the neighbors next to that and on the other corners, on the northern.
No, we didn't. We spoke with the Senior Services Commission, the Los Gatos Recreation, and Los Gatos Saratoga Senior Services, I think.
Right, but not the people who would be directly impacted by looking at the building in their daily
Right.
lives.
We were specifically told to reach out to University Oaks.
Okay. Another question on a different topic. You mentioned a couple of times that you would meet the height requirements without the mansard roof. What would you do if you didn't have the mansard roof?
Well, that's the thing I think the architecture that we were requested to pursue, that it calls for that type of architecture. If we had a true roof and not the mansard roof, it'd be much taller. So it just would be kind of out of balance, unfortunately, and you would, I think, it'd take a lot of articulation away from the structure.
Thank you.
Further questions? Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you for your presentation and coming here tonight. I do have two questions. The first is just about which this whole application is coming like right in between our general plan situation. So which general plan were you like working off of essentially for a majority of this project? Even though I know the 2020 is what applies, but briefly we thought that the 2041 was there.
At the time, I believe we just had the 2020 information, so we were deemed complete in 2022, and I don't believe the 2040 process had those draft documents ready, so we were sticking with what we knew.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is just related to the information on your last slide. Would you just, first of all, have you been involved in any other projects where you have gone through like these other routes, and would you just like maybe be able to elaborate a little bit more what these development alternatives would look like?
Sure. So I have not personally submitted an SB 6 or AB 2011. They did just go into effect, but we were aware of them, that they were passed into law for 2023. I have submitted an application for builder's remedy. That is also another option that we could pursue, but again, it's not something that we want to pursue. When it comes to these two laws, they do require, the AB 2011 does require 15% affordable. So that would be part of the project as well. But again, to get a density bonus, you have to have that affordability anyways. I think for efficiency's sake and maybe cost, we probably wouldn't do a basement. It would probably be a project that would be a podium. And so right now I think the average size of our units are 400 to I think 700 is maybe the biggest square feet. So to have an apartment in Los Gatos, most likely it would make sense to have 2 bedrooms. So even though the units would be 120 units versus 125 for the current proposed project, you could have 120 units of at least 2 people. So that would be more parking, challenges, more traffic challenges, and AB 2011 and SB 6, I believe, are ministerial. So we would not come to the Planning Commission to get approval.
May I follow up?
Please do, Commissioner Thomas.
And this might be a question for staff. If you don't know, that's fine. With regards with going through those pathways, what does the parking? Do you know what the parking minimum looks like for that, or is there not? Would you not have to follow that?
I think the state law supersedes. I think it's one space per unit. I think it depends on the size.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll ask. We can follow up
Sure.
and ask the town attorney when the time allows. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else at this time? Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about affordability. What income level are you targeting, and are there any affordable units incorporated, or did you consider incorporating affordable units?
So the challenge with these facilities, and again, this would be more of this is based on the knowledge I know from the operators that we work on. So us, Swenson, we're not targeting a certain group, but again, we're trying to provide a high-end facility for the town of Los Gatos. When it comes to the affordability, the challenge of that is these facilities have a requirement. In order for them to be licensed, they have to have 3 hot meals a day. There needs to be medication management. They're legally responsible for the people on site. So there's a lot of factors as part of that certification, and there's a fixed cost to that. So it's hard to subsidize a fixed cost. And our operators have found that challenging. And so when it comes to municipalities that do have an in lieu option, that tends to be the solution. So.
Did that answer your question? Okay, Commissioner Burnett.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. So a question on the traffic. It says that there would be, 351 daily trips at the facility. So since it's memory care and assisted living, is that workers or 351 trips, nurses or caregivers?
Sure. So the majority of the trips will be staff. So I know the study that we referenced, I think it referenced like 28 trips per peak hour in the AM, and then for lunch and then when leaving. So how we understand it from our operators, there's 3 rounds. So you have your morning shift, the mid shift, and then a night shift. You have to have someone on site 24/7. And they've expressed there's probably about 14 to 18 staff members, and there would be a doctor there. I think that wouldn't include the doctor. So you're looking about 19 people per round or per shift, if you will. And so the majority of these residents are, the reason why they're there is either them or their partner need assistance. And so more often than not, the cars that are there don't move a lot, and not many of them actually own cars. The memory care is contained, and memory care does require more staffing. So that's why you're only seeing about 18 memory care units and more assisted living. It's a different class. So memory care is more hands-on.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any further questions? I have one for you, sir. A couple of the letters that were submitted by neighbors indicated that the meeting was not conducted in an open manner, and that it was sort of a fait accompli that was presented to them. Can you give me some idea of how long the meeting lasted and whether a free exchange of ideas?
Sure. So in our previous meetings, I don't think everyone was there. And then this last final meeting, because it is a very real a project that's going to be heard, every member was there. And so there were a few people that had never seen the project before and shared their initial concerns from seeing it at the very beginning and expecting, further change. So I think last week when we spoke with the residents, is essentially the frustration is that the project was already deemed complete and that there wouldn't be any further change. So again, in the reason why there wouldn't be any further changes, we're deemed complete, and we've been trying to get to the Planning Commission. So would it make sense for us to try to adjust the project and then go through that and look at, every time we change something, all the reports have to be updated. So it was our goal to get deemed complete and continue to move the project forward. We were deemed complete in 2022. And since then, I don't believe anyone had reached out to us, maybe one resident, the one in particular that we had an individual meeting with planning staff. So I think the frustration was that there was nothing further to be augmented on our project, and our project is being proposed as such. So.
I see. Okay, thank you for that. And if there are no further questions from commissioners, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And we now have a request for an opportunity to speak from Joseph Giamargiani. Please come forward.
It's a tough name.
It is.
I'm getting older, so I actually have to have a card with me. I never would have this problem before. I only would come up here if I'm in favor of a project. And I've seen many proposals for this particular site over the years. There's been like 3 or 4. And actually, I didn't like any of them. But when I saw this one, I go, this is a beautiful project. And I'm glad, I guess the town architect must agree. I think it's the architecture is timeless. I think it'll fit in with Los Gatos, kind of from a historical perspective, yet it does have the pizzazz that kind of is future forward looking too. I just think it's beautiful. Now, what worries me is I've heard some things about taking off the roof, and that I think I would not be in favor if you took off the roof. It would just start looking like so many buildings in the Bay Area, well, across the country as I travel, that are just flat, boxy looking buildings. People are starting to get really fed up with it. Getting tired of this boxy look. Please do not take off the roof part of it. I think that's actually a pretty component of the building itself. And along with that, is there any way we can have the height limitation? I'm not an architect, so I don't know the word, that would just consider the wall part, is that called the plane? I'm not sure. And not include roof articulation. Because what I'm afraid of, builders are just going to go up, let's say you say it's 35 feet. They're going to build up to the 35 feet and just forget about the roof part. Get as many square footage as they can. So is there any way someone can kind of look at that and say, don't include the roof articulation? Otherwise, please don't change this project just for a few feet and keep the roof. I think it makes the project look a lot better. So that's about all I can say. And if you can address the height and exclude maybe the roof portion, if someone can look at that.
Okay, before you go, we have questions from the commissioners potentially. I don't see any. Can I ask you for your address?
Yeah, 4860 National Avenue, but I'm in San Jose, but if I look across the street, it's Los Gatos. So that whole side is Los Gatos and our side is San Jose. I'm not sure why.
I see. Okay,
but it's right near Carlton and National.
Thank you. All right, we next have a card from Mr. Luster or Lustra. It'd be Luster in French.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Albert Lustre with the Northern California Carpenters Union Local 405. And it's great to see a project like this. An opportunity, and also it'd be great to this project have opportunity to provide healthcare, apprenticeship programs, local hire, fair wages, not only making a smart business decision, but also contributing to the well-being of the growth of the community. First and foremost, having a responsible general contractor that provides healthcare, benefits and ensures the welfare of members. Access to quality healthcare is essential for the productivity and security of the workforce. Apprenticeship programs offer a golden opportunity for the development of the talent with the local community. Working with contractors that promotes apprenticeship means investing in the future of skilled workers. The programs bridge the gap between education and hands-on experience by building the next generation of professionals who will drive innovation and growth in the industry. Local hire contribute to the economic prosperity of our region by providing jobs, opportunities, support for local families. These approaches not only highlight our workforce, but also foster the sense of belonging. Perhaps one of the most significant advantages of having a responsible contractor is the assurance of having a fair wage that have a fair and a livable wage for all workers. Fair wages not only uplift the living standards of employees, but also create a stable and motivated workforce. The commitment to using a responsible contractor on this project, a project like this will prevent wage theft, tax fraud. The unethical practices not only harm the workers, but also underline the dignity of our business environment. By partnering with a contractor that adheres to ethical practices and pays fair wage taxes, it contributes to a fair and equitable economy that benefits all stakeholders. In conclusion, the decision to collaborate with the general contractor to focus on healthcare, apprenticeship, local hire, fair wages, and it speaks volumes about our commitment to both the construction worker and the community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for the speaker? I don't see any. Our next speaker will be Chris Sullivan. You'd come forward. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Chris Sullivan. I'm the property manager for Park Hillview Apartments. It's right on the corner, well, actually in between University and Santa Cruz Avenue, right where we went into Blossom Hill. Excuse me. Right now, it's very interesting that we learned that there's a slope involved with the building of the proposed building. What you may not know is that Park Hillview in itself has experienced, and we have a pump that drains off the water table that comes down off Bruce Avenue and that whole sector of property above us across the street from Santa Cruz Avenue. Now, we even had an event during this atmospheric river that we all experienced where a sinkhole presented itself. And you can check the water department because they came out and looked at it. Rushing water was coming down in between the condominium, that's our next door neighbor, between the two of us, and created a sinkhole. And the water was raging coming through there. So I have a concern, one, about maybe shoehorning this project into the corner. But there are things that, I mean, I'm curious if anybody's done any studies on the land as far as the water table and where that runs, number one. Number two, I have 30 units in our apartment complex and our parking's exhausted. I can't have, I mean, my tenants walk from Bruce up the street and all along University Avenue just to find a parking space over by, even down by the auto body stores down there. Putting a complex that has 107 people and then 18 people and then the employees that go with it, even with underground parking, you're going to have a problem. And I don't know if you guys have been on the weekends on Winchester to Santa Cruz Avenue and University. It's a parking lot. It's from 10 a.m. to 2:30 in the afternoon. It's a parking lot. So I don't know. I mean, our people even struggle when we have the City of Lights that comes on in the wintertime. We can't even get in and out of our parking garage because the traffic is backed up for all the way almost to Lark Avenue. So we really have an issue here that I think we may be premature in wanting to do it. We love the concept, but no one's talked to us about the impact that this is going to have, not to mention the construction. If you're going to cut all that and do the civil and all the sewer and all the water, I mean, it's going to be a mess for a while for everybody that lives in the area, and we don't want that to happen. So it's not. We're hoping that you guys don't pass this because it's in its form now, because it's not going to work for us. Thanks. Any questions?
Mr. Sullivan, thanks for standing by, and Commissioner Thomas.
Yeah, I do have a question. Thank you for coming and speaking tonight. Since you're representing this community, what sort of development would have less of an impact for you in this location? Or would any development have an impact?
It's a complicated answer because you've got a auto shop, a veterinarian facility, and then you've got 4 homes, and then you've got trees there that need to stay being trees. Something that a contractor could come up with, or someone to purchase the property, that would build homes that would be consistent with the neighborhood look of the area, I think would be helpful.
So you're saying that you would want single family homes to go in there?
Something to that effect. Duplexes would be fine, but residential, not commercial. You start going into commercial and we start getting scared because, oh my, what's going to happen next? But I would say something like duplexes, residential.
And, okay, so how would that address the parking issue for you?
Well, you wouldn't have 107 people. Do all these, I mean, I heard it's called residential, but it's commercial. Yeah. Do each one of these 107 units have kitchens?
Yes.
Each one of them
sorry,
has a kitchen?
we're not answering.
We can't
I
answer
can't answer
questions
questions.
for you, but
yeah, because I'm curious about that.
The developer will have another opportunity to speak.
Okay.
And he can address that.
Yeah. So anyway, that's.
Okay, thank you.
So, thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Sullivan? If not, thank you, sir. And next would be Mary McCloy. If you'd please come forward.
Hi, good evening, Commissioners. Thank you very much. My name is Mary McCloy, and I live at 698 North Santa Cruz Avenue at Park Hill View Apartments, where Mr. Sullivan also lives. There's about 40 of us there at Park Hill View. We're 2 doors down from the proposed construction. We live next door to University Oaks. We're the next building down. I attended the Planning Commission a few weeks ago when there was a mix-up on dates to talk about this property, but I had never been to a Planning Commission meeting before, and I want you to know how impressed I am with the way this commission handles its business. I've been a resident of Los Gatos for almost 30 years, living in the same place. I walk by the proposed construction site often and have been concerned since the signage went up describing the building of the assisted care and memory care structure. These are my concerns. The signage and the QR code video describing the building what it would look like. It seemed like a chalet-type structure with no other buildings around, multiple trees with an unobstructed view of Santa Cruz Mountains. In reality, this is an existing neighborhood with homes, small businesses that fit style of current architecture that are mostly 1 story or 2 stories. Winchester is a very busy traffic corridor, not a nice, quiet street that cars occasionally are passing by, and often are quite crowded at commute times and on summer weekends, and especially at times for school. We've got Dave's school up the street, right across the street from where this construction is, and Bruce is quite congested, beginning of school at the end of the school day. This is not a quiet site for an assisted living facility. The proposed building takes up many lots and trees and is 3 stories tall. This is way out of proportion for this neighborhood of homes and trees. The proposed building exceeds the height size and limit size and would set a precedent for the future development of the same types of larger structures in our neighborhood. There are regulations for a reason, to keep our community in some type of uniformity and the same type of character of our neighborhoods. We need housing for older adults. I think I can qualify for that. But not here on this street, taking up the height and space of this proposed building. It is out of place in our neighborhood. Places like the Belmont Village on Union Street in Los Gatos, they found an empty lot in a neighborhood for its location. Other places like the Belmont Village in South Winchester, they found an existing neighborhood where their building fit fine. We do need assisted living. We do need memory care units. We just don't need one located on this property. And I just have another side. When I heard this gentleman speak about talking to neighbors, I have no knowledge of any meetings, no flyers. That was the first I ever heard there were meetings of people that live in the neighborhood. At least where we live, there was nothing proposed. All the signage went up, and
I'm sorry,
it said
you
about
are out
this
of
tonight.
time, but commissioners may have questions for you.
Okay.
And thank you for your comments so far. Commissioner Thomas.
Hi, thank you for coming. I just have the same question as the last speaker. Just what type of development would you be supportive of seeing here?
I would see something on a much smaller scale, kind of like that office building one that was going to go up there before. It kind of fit. And they weren't taking down everything around it to make it. They weren't really changing the whole look of the area. It was something that fit in. This just does not fit in.
Other questions? I don't see any. Thank you very much for coming tonight and for your comments. And do we have anyone on Zoom? Ms. Armour?
We do, thank you. We've got at least a couple of people who have raised their hands to speak on Zoom. And so we will start with Georgina. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm Georgina Van Horn at 706 Winchester Boulevard here at the University Oaks. My concern, first of all, I know there was going to be a building at that site. My concern is this building that's proposed is absolutely enormous. It comes almost to our wall that separates the 2 properties. It will overwhelm this area, as the speaker just said. Winchester is away into town, from Lark, from 85, and it becomes North Santa Cruz right here at this point. So it will affect drastically this area. But will also affect, like me personally, I'm one of the 2 closest condos or townhouses to the property. And our front doors are not on Winchester. The 2 closest are not on Winchester. They would be facing a whole side of the property, our front doors. They're townhouses, they're 2 stories. So again, I am concerned about looking and seeing into those windows and seeing into mine. When I walk over to my window here, I'm upstairs, and I look out and I see the poles, the flags have been gone, and I have to look and raise my head so far to see the top of those poles. And the thing is, I know how close they will be to us. You know, we just have a little driveway here in front of our 2 townhouses that are the closest, because it's not a regular driveway. It doesn't even go through the university. And then we have just a small, like a 2 feet of dirt with some bushes and a few trees. And then almost here past the wall that's there will be this absolutely gigantic building. And we've tried here at the University Oaks to keep the woodsy feel of our town, and the fact that just across University here, you know, there's our 2 big parks. And this building does not fit into our small town feel. As I say, I know there will be a building there, but first of all, we need more room here before, with our front doors, and not to have this, I think of it as a wall. And just maybe you can picture your house, if look where your front door is, if it's 2 stories and you have this building so close to you, it would drastically impact your house.
Okay, so you
Yep.
you are out of time. I apologize for that.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
there may be questions for you from the commissioners.
Okay,
I'm looking. I don't see any. Thank you for participating tonight.
thank you.
And we have another Zoom caller.
We do. We still have 2 hands raised. The next is Dylan. You should be able to unmute and speak.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Dylan Parker, 702 Winchester Boulevard. And I am also the person apparently the applicant has identified as the person that they met with that went line by line item and is apparently disagreeable to any aspect of this project. So I just wanted to kind of start the conversation by letting you know that I am also a planner for another jurisdiction. So I'm acutely aware of kind of what happens on your side of the dais. And I think one thing that's particularly interesting that the applicant has brought up in this conversation is essentially their true intentions. Now, the applicant would say that they've met with us extensively and they've met our concerns through modifying the project. But I want to point back to what they said towards the end of the conversation, where essentially they were saying this is a foregone conclusion, that if we don't get what we want as designed with a variance, that we're going to apply for a builder's remedy. We're going to apply for an SB6 or an AB 2011. So I want you to consider that the true intentions of the applicant were not to collaborate and outreach to the neighbors. The true intentions of the applicant are to build what they want, how they want, with complete disregard to not only our concerns, but to the town's concerns and to the town's development standards. Now, switching gears, discussing in terms of the town staff has noted that the use is commercial, but it counts towards the RENA allocation for affordable units, if you will. But the interesting component of that is this site is zoned office. Office is considered a transitional zone from commercial uses to residential uses. So, in other words, the development standards are intended to minimize the development impacts of a commercial use next to a residential use. Now, if the town staff statement, if you carry that forward a little bit and say, well, this is considered housing, but it's a commercial use, then it would make better sense to have development standards similar to the multi-residential zoning district, where there are additional requirements with regards to setbacks, distance between buildings, etc. So what this sounds like is kind of a mixing of 2 development standards to get the benefit of the best.
Excuse me, Mr.
In respect.
Parker, you are out of time. We did receive your comments in writing. But I'll ask at this time if commissioners have questions for you. I do not see any. So thank you for your comments.
And next up is Demian. You should be able to unmute and speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Demian Raspal, 713 University Avenue. I am also serving as the president of the HOA for University Oaks, and I really appreciate your time attending our concerns on this matter. I want to acknowledge that we agree and we actually are understand and agree that the architecture on the building as well as the proposed use that Swenson consulted with us is bringing something that our community is agreeable with. However, we disagree in two, as stated before, in two arguments. One is that the building is too large, as it was mentioned, and that is too close to our community, and it's too tall on our community. It is true that it's a two-story building, but as the pictures presented by Swanson showed, it's actually a three-story building because of the slope when it's in front of, for example, Georgina's house. I want to use the majority of the time, since there's enough technical and detailed discussion on the merits of the project, to actually address the concern, the points raised by the Commission, because I see that the Commission really care about the outreach and how conversations went with our HOA. And as it was shown on slide 2, I believe, it was very clear that between basically June of 21 until 8 of 23, so August of 23, there was no outreach of any kind. And that's 26 months in which Swenson continued to develop and fine-tune the project. However, we were never invited to have any type of conversation. The meeting you asked, one of the commissioners asked about how the meeting was conducted last week, and we were appreciative that Swenson reached. It is our understanding that Swenson reached at the request of the architectural or the staff members. In fact, Mr. Briston said, we were told to reach out to University Avenue, so it didn't even come from them. They were told to reach us to us. But as it was stated in our letter, this is a done deal, this is a done project. If you have any issues with the project, you should come to this meeting and present the issues, because we're not going to change the project. And if you don't like the project, and if the Commission doesn't approve the project, then we're going to build something that you will like even less. And that is the attitude that the developer has had with us.
Okay.
I just want to conclude by...
I'm sorry. Your time is
yes.
up. I appreciate your comments, and let's see if commissioners have questions for you. I don't see any, so thank you for calling in and presenting your views. Is there anyone else on Zoom?
We don't have any other hands raised, so if anyone on Zoom would like to speak, please raise your hand now. I don't see any more hands raised, Chair.
Thank you. So we'll now give the applicant another 3 minutes to speak. Oh, we do have a speaker. And you want to submit a card, sir?
Sorry, I submitted slides that I was going to talk about. You can go first. Oh, please go ahead. Sorry. You can pull out a card.
If we please have your name and address, and we have materials from you.
Hi, Brian Mekachuk, 17509 Via Sereno, Monte Sereno. I live directly across the street from the proposed property, and I submitted quite a lengthy letter explaining my position, our family's position. Several people on Via Sereno asked me to represent them, but I can't do that. I am an elected official in Monte Sereno. I'm the mayor. And I believe we are your single biggest partner with Los Gatos. So one of the things that I really want to point out, other than the information in here, is that, and I'll read the line, the third paragraph says, "My wife and family welcome the development of the proposed site, provided it is an attractive and sustainable development that fits with Los Gatos." A number of the commissioners have asked speakers, what would you see there? We see a project similar to what was designed and approved by town council before. This project is a multiple of the size of that. I would wholeheartedly support a project that was of the size and nature of what was there before. To deal with the applicant, and I don't say this lightly, he's being disingenuous in terms of outreach to the community. Disingenuous. I spoke with the gentleman, Mr. Bristow, immediately after the town council meeting. I gave him my card and I said, I would like to speak with you. I'd like to understand the project, and so you hear my concern. What did I hear from him? Crickets. Nothing. In fact, I felt dissed. Okay? And there's no, if you look at if you go down Winchester Boulevard, you'll see the side of the building. The building will be massive. It won't be at the back. I raised a number of points in here, including the outdated and stale plans and reports. It's the things that if you were to approve it, you have to rely on those findings, and I don't think that you can do that with those stale plans. I mentioned the high-pressure natural gas transmission line. That's kind of a secret because PG&E doesn't say where their infrastructure is. The single biggest high-pressure transmission natural gas pipeline going into Los Gatos is right by this.
I'm sorry, we do have to interrupt you since your time is up, but I'll ask commissioners if they have questions of you. And we do have your extensive communications to the Planning Commission and staff in advance, so that's appreciated and is considered. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Mr. Holzer, I believe you wanted to come forward and make a presentation.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Thank you for listening to me. My name is Eric Holzer. I am the neighbor to Georgina, who you heard earlier, and I live at 708 Winchester Boulevard, which is closest property to this development. I have a number of objections to this project. It sounds like you guys have read a number of them already, but I wanted to focus my attention today on this part right here, the south-facing wall. A lot of these renders that have been presented are very misleading to the council and to the public. So that is not a road, that is my driveway. Where that line is, that is our wall. This property scoots right up to the end of our property here. If you could please go to the next slide. This would be the view that we would see coming out our front door if we were about 100 yards back and there were no buildings there. Again, these cars would be in our driveway. Oftentimes, I hear that this is presented as a two-story building. That may be true up at the Winchester side, but it quickly goes into a three-story building, and that is what we look at. Next slide, please. This would be what you would see out of our windows. So on the left, that's my daughter's bedroom window. On the right, that's my bedroom window. If you were down in our living room, you would not even be able to see the sky. So this is taking that same rendering that you just saw, but putting it in proper context. This is mapped up to the tent poles that are kind of poorly approximating this project. One of the reasons I think this is quite misleading is because the size and scale of this project, they were unable to do proper netting, they were unable to do proper flags. Even the billboard that is up does not draw your attention the way it should. Next slide, please. This is also another misrepresentation. So this is showing that same variance, and we are arguing that the roof should not be included. However, you can see here that the height line is drawn to the natural grade that is closest to us, but not, and then if you look at the closer building here, that would be what we look at. It's saying the entire thing is below that line. Next slide, please. So as you go farther back, that's the actual amount that would be over this variance, that is over 50 feet high for that central building. So that was not properly reflected in really any of the slides that the developer presented. Next slide, please. Again, if I remove that wall, you can see pretty clearly this is a 3-story building that we stare at, not a 2-story building, as has been multiple times referenced. In addition, the yellow would be what is above the 35-foot limit. As has also been brought up, we would recommend that this is not office spaces. Those are living rooms, and those are bedrooms, and they are right up against the wall. In an RM, that would be 20 feet back, not 10 feet back. I'm at time. Thank you.
Thank you. Stand by for questions. I don't see any. Oh, Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you for submitting this information and preparing these slides. What type of, well, I have 2 questions for you. The first is the type of development that you would want to see in this location, and like what sort of setback or screening would make you more comfortable with a building being built here?
Yes, thank you. As the developer mentioned, in 2020 we had said we would be okay with an assisted living facility. I think we were still okay with that. We were given the choice of you get either apartment complexes or assisted living. Given the choice, we chose assisted living. We don't get much say in that choice. All I ask is it be built according to code. So as far as what goes there, it looks beautiful. I have no objections to the look or feel of the project, but the size and scale and scope is immense. So what we would be okay with, or what at least I personally would be okay with, is a building built according to code. And as far as the zoning, you were asking the setback requirements. I would, again, this project is using up 50% versus 40%. You could take that wall back and cut down on that overusage. And if you were to adhere to an RM, then that building, what you would see out of our front door, would be totally acceptable. And the people who live there would have a building that would be built according to code for the residents of the building. It may be said that it's going to be a commercial project, but the people who live there will be people. That's not an office space. That's people living in their homes, in their living rooms, staring into mine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the speaker? I don't see any. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
So we don't have any other members of the public on Zoom or who have submitted cards. So we'll now give the applicant an additional 3 minutes to make a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try to address the comments as much as possible. So for Mr. Sullivan, the comments regarding the cut in the study done on the soil, we do have a geotechnical report. There are kitchens in the assisted living. There are no kitchens in memory care for obvious reasons. And it's zoned office, so we can't do single family homes. We can't do estates. I know people want a lesser impact use, but we're dealing with what it's zoned for. Again, same with the next speaker, Mary McCloy. It's a 1 or 2 story single family homes. It's not feasible for this site. We did reach out to Safe Routes to School. There was a mention. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. But we did reach out to them early on in the process, and they never got back to us because we just wanted to, basically our position was like, hey, this is less traffic trips than an office building. So, we hope you're in favor of something like this. And there was a discussion a little bit about the office and how, I know it's a smaller building, but in our opinion, it's a higher impact use. And the office building was proposing to remove 31 trees. Our project is proposing to remove 29, if it makes any difference. Regarding, some of the comments on, how it's a foregone conclusion from Mr. Parker. AB 2011 and SB 6 wasn't a draft law until 2022. We were deemed complete in 2022. So it was never our intention to to just go this route and just build multifamily if we don't get our way. That wasn't our intention. But as you know, the state does want more housing and bigger projects, which I think is difficult for people to get used to, but we have to build vertically because or else we're going to run out of land. So with that said, it's something that is an option today. And again, we're trying to build something of use that was the direction we got originally in 2020. Excuse me. And regarding, I do understand, Damien's comments, that they feel it's too large, too tall, too big. During the call, I did not express that, hey, if you guys don't like this, we're going to build something bigger. I did not express that. It is an option that we could go down. So it was, I guess I didn't want to, it wasn't presented in that manner at that meeting, so I'd just like to clarify that. Regarding Mr. Machekuk's comments, he said sustainable building. This will be a LEED silver building. It's required by the general plan. We'll have solar and California green building standards. Regarding outreach, if I recall, if correctly, Mr. Machekuk called me and left a voicemail, and I think we might have spoke on the phone once, where he basically said, hey, this is essentially what he said today, is that I'll support it if it stays within the height of the office building. And then at the story pole meeting, we did converse out back, and it was clear that he was frustrated, and again, our project was already deemed complete, so there was nothing that I could have adjusted at that time. So I do apologize for not getting back to you, but it wasn't in a malicious manner.
We are out of time. But,
yeah, sorry. If you have any questions.
Let's see if planning commissioners have any questions. Commissioner Raspy.
Thank you, Chair. One quick question, following up to Mr. Holster's comments, essentially indicating he would be satisfied with the project if it didn't seek a variance. That is, if you were at the 0.40 lot coverage and the 35-foot height limit throughout. My question to you is, did you analyze the project in that sense? And sub B to that, is it possible to do that project within those parameters?
Sure. So by going 40%, we lose a lot of amenity space for the residents. And additionally, if we do 40%, the design I actually think would shorten at the back. It wouldn't shorten as far as the width in the proximity to the University Oaks neighbors. So 40% is nice, but again, I don't think it's going to accomplish what Eric spoke to, and he spoke to a conforming project, right? So the facade that he views, and I do acknowledge it is close to his property, the facade that he views, even if you eliminate that roof and we just do some type of mechanical equipment shielding on top, you're still going to have that building is conforming in height. So that two-story building that we have is conforming, and even if you dropped it even lower, then you're viewing past. You're going to see, even if they wanted one story at that point, looking past it, you're going to see a two-story building. So, it's kind of, and again, you're going to alter the kind of the balance of the building and how it looks overall. So, but we could look at it. Currently, right now, the top floor I think has, I want to say 30 units. So if the entire top floor goes away, we would have 30 units less, and that would be 30 units that would not be towards the regional housing numbers.
Follow-up question, please. Assuming just for the sake of argument, 30 units less on the top floor. Now, of course, it would hurt town on our numbers. Does it still remain a viable project for you and or the developer?
So when it comes to operations, for our operators, they try to have over 100 units when it comes to the assisted living. The memory care, again, usually would stay roughly that. So it would be substandard from an operating standpoint. I'm sure there might be some operators that would be interested, but the ones we've worked with and the ones we've consulted, they are attracted to the project as it is proposed today.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Uri.
Thank you.
Other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Hanson.
My question is going about the height. I understand I mean, my view of this is there's probably a trade-off. If you had less height, you're going to need more lot coverage to, provide the amenities that you want. Are there assisted living memory care facilities out there that are only 35 feet tall? I mean,
yes,
yeah.
but they would have a very low amount of units, and it gets to a point of, is it worth even building the project? You know, so that there's a balancing act there.
But, well, if there was more land, let's just say instead of 1.3 acres, it was 2 acres or 2.5.
Yes, absolutely.
Then you could have.
Correct. Yeah. So if we had 2 acres, we could probably fit the whole building there on 2 stories, but we don't. We have a finite amount of land.
Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? I have a question for you, sir. As I understand, to make the variances that are requested for height and lot coverage, that we have to determine that there are special circumstances applicable to the property, such as size, shape, topography, location, or surroundings that justify that deviation from the standard. Can you speak to that?
Sure. So to have a functioning facility, the way we've designed it and with the topography, the challenge is we're trying to meet that height as much as possible on Winchester, but it's because of the sloping lot and the way the code reads that it has to be a set height, I believe, averaged across the lot. It's not at the frontage. And so because we have that sloping challenge, we're not able to meet that for this proposed project.
Thank you for those comments. And Commissioner Janoff.
Yeah, excuse me, I'm confused about the height. You say that it's conforming without the mansard roof, but we're not doing away with the roof, just in case anybody out there thought that was the direction we were going. The question was to the developer. When I read the plans, which are needing a magnifying glass at best for us, I see 39-foot height for the lower portion of the building, increasing to a 50-foot height for the higher portions of the building. So could you explain how 39 feet is conforming to 35?
Sure. Would it be possible to pull up slide 5 from the presentation? Thank you. Oh man. So I understand your problem. So I have the plan set. So when I'm speaking regarding, so the blue line, you could probably see a little better. That is the average sloping height. So that is 35 feet with the topography as you go down. So yes, if you measure from the straight point up, you have different heights at the depth of the back of the property. But when you read the building, that's where we're trying to meet that height as much as possible. So the center of the building where you see just past the garage, it peaks up just a little bit over, but that's because of the way the property slopes, and we can't have a slanted building. Those are corridors. We have to have elevator access. There's all these challenges, and if you try to move one elevator only and shorten it, then you're going to have an access issue for basically what's a medical facility. And so we have to have a central elevator point, and that's essentially where the elevator house would be in the middle wing of the project. So if you look at the frontage on Winchester to the right, you can see part of our mansard roof is just floating under that blue line, but because the property slopes, we're having challenges meeting it. And even if you took off that top floor, the mansard roof would still be impacting the height restriction. And so I think maybe the question is to staff. I understood that the building top plate is what was being measured, and the mansard roof would not be counted because it's really just shielding mechanical equipment, but maybe I'm incorrect.
I would defer to staff, but it's my understanding that it's the actual top height of the structure, including the roof. Essentially, what's being obscured visually is the height of the building, and so that's why I'm confused when you say you're meeting our 35-foot requirement, when in fact there's very little except a little bit of the eave that's on the Winchester side that looks like it might be below, and the balance of the building looks like it's well above the 35 feet. I would defer to staff if that interpretation is not correct, but what I'm hearing you say is different from my understanding of how height requirements are calculated or read. Number one, given that, would it be possible for you to even meet the 35-foot requirement? I understand that the slope of the lot will give us a higher height at the rear of the lot. That's understood. We knew that before when it was the previous project and understood that, which is why we asked for the building to be shifted back as far as possible on the lot, so you had a lower elevation at the front. I don't see any of this proposal meeting our 35-foot requirement, let alone, where it slopes to 50. I mean, I understand that part, but I'm at a loss at how we could approve it this way when it's nearly 100% above town requirements.
Yeah, and I think in kind of reference to where it is conforming, it would be the two-story component that's on the other side. This side is challenged, and so I think in order to meet it, you would have to remove the top floor, which would be a challenge for us from an operational standpoint, and it's not something we really want to do. Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions? Commissioner Thomas?
I do have a question just about does the slope allow for more below ground parking than typically you would be able to have?
So that's
with
why
less digging.
Yeah, so that's why we have a basement. If you actually take the garage and call that the basement and treated that as the lowest point, we'd be meeting the height. If that garage entrance point was your measuring stick, then we would be meeting the height. But the town reads garages as part of the building, and even though it's half in, half out, we're being dinged for that. So the office building actually did a bunch of fill and had surface parking. And actually, when we met with the neighbors, their concern was all the cars were parked and their lights would be in their windows. Well, so we actually enclosed the garage and we built on top of it.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Respi.
Just a quick follow-up question. What are your floor plate heights in
10 feet? They're close to 10 feet.
So, which is that standard? Is it above average? And I guess my question is there any play there that...
For assisted living, it's standard. I think the smallest you could go for residential is 8, but it's really tight. But for this type of facility, close to 10 feet is pretty standard.
Is that a requirement because of its specific use, the medical equipment? Or it's just standard?
I'm going to consult with my architect.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So actually, I can speak to that. David Meads with Swenson.
Have you state your name, please?
David Meads with Swenson, architect. So no, it would be plate height would be 10-foot floor to floor, right? But then hanging it back down into that space would be the floor structure, and then drop ceiling for mechanical and whatnot. And so you're looking at right around a 9-foot ceiling, which is current market standards at this point.
I appreciate that. So my question, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. Is there a way to shrink the mass just by shrinking the floor plate?
Oh, by dropping the floor plates. Right now, I mean, that would put you kind of subpar with what current market is offering. That's more of something you'd see back in the 70s and early 80s with an 8-foot ceiling height.
Okay. Just want to make sure we're examining all our options. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Other questions or comments? If not, we don't have anyone further on Zoom.
We had closed the general public comment, so once
That's
you are
true.
done with questions with the applicant, then that would be the end of comments.
Thank you for that reminder. And so at this point, we'll close the public portion of the public meeting and ask commissioners if they wish to comment, ask questions of staff, or present a motion. Commissioner Hanson.
I have a question for staff. Under construction off of Blossom Hill is a assisted living memory care facility that we looked at a couple of years ago. What is the height of that? Do you have that information?
Thank you for that question. Yes, that was able to comply with the required height limits of 35 feet.
Okay, that was my recollection of the hearing was it was easy. it met a need and there wasn't any variances. Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Commissioner Janoff?
Yeah, thank you. It's a beautiful building. The architecture is wonderful. I think the articulation of the building mass is well done. But in my opinion, it's just too high. And to go from, with regard to the neighborhood outreach, to go from 30,000 square feet to 81,000 square feet is a huge jump without any conversation about what and why. So I'm talking about the project that was previously approved as the office building compared to what we're looking at now. I really appreciate, however, that this is an assisted living facility. I think that's a need in town. I've moved my mother to 2 different assisted living facilities in the last several months. There's no need for a 9-foot, 10-foot interior plate height. I'm in agreement, I think, with Commissioner Raspy is perhaps going, and that suggesting that the plate heights be reduced to get a little bit of relief on the overall height of the building. But yeah, I mean, if you can take it, and if we can get 3 stories in 35 feet, let's get 3 stories in 35 feet. And if you have to run to the back and we need more height in the back, I don't have any issue with giving that height variance. Having said all of that, I actually don't have an issue with the variance on the 40% over 50% lot coverage. In fact, I would say if you can get the height down, you could have more lot coverage, because we want these units, but we want them to reasonably fit within the visual element of town. So I'm struggling with both requests for variance. It's like too much. If you could have one, if you could get the height down to the 35 and take the back higher, I wouldn't have any issue with that. But even better to get the whole thing down even lower and take more lot coverage.
But keep the roof, right?
I'm not
You're
suggesting this be a roofless building. Thank you.
Commissioner Hanson?
I agree with Commissioner Janoff. It's a beautifully designed building. I was on the Planning Commission when we heard the office building, and I was also on the CDAC when we heard the concept for, because the office building wasn't going to work out. They couldn't find a tenant, and you know, we all know what has happened to the office market, so that's not been a good scene. When I was looking at this, I think the CDAC was, they didn't put our minutes in here, but I recall the CDAC was generally favorable to the idea, but you know, it's a concept, it's not a design. When I saw this, the first thing I thought of is it was the height. And what it is that it's not that it's unreasonable to have a 50-foot tall building in town, but is this the thing that we would do it for, and is this the right place to do it? And that's why I asked the question at the beginning, you know, about the heights of buildings on Winchester. I mean, way at the north end of town, we have Netflix, and that's taller, but it's at the very north end of town, and it's not approximated by lots and lots of single-family residential, or you know, the kind of units that you'll see in the part of Winchester you're on. So I think that the concept makes a lot of sense, but what I'm hearing is that that because of the requirements for an assisted living facility, it has to be more and than really might be appropriate for the site. It's 1.3 acres. It's in a residential neighborhood with, you know, single stories. That's what the pushback is coming from the residents, is that it doesn't fit well into the neighborhood. So getting back to the you know, whether the project is approvable or not, I mean, certainly the town desires more housing units. Certainly there's a need for assisted living. You know, we have an aging population, but this seems like it's too much. And so I could imagine a scenario where if it met the height limit, it might be possible to, see this fitting in, but then it sounds like it won't pencil out for the operators that need that. So maybe there is another site that would be more appropriate for assisted living. But as it stands right now, I couldn't make the findings for the variance for the height.
Thank you for those comments. Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. I will share a few of my thoughts. I think it's really important to go into this with the mindset that opportunities like this don't come up all the time, and we only get one shot at this, really. Like, this is probably whatever happens with this property is what it'll look like for our entire lives. So I just think it's really important to think about that. And I mean, I'm hearing a lot of people saying that we need this, but not here. This is definitely something important, but we need it somewhere else. But we would hear that. I really believe we would hear that pretty much anywhere that we put it. And so the way I see it is it's being proposed here. During my site visit, I felt like it fit in pretty well, actually. And, it's the properties that it would be replacing aren't any major loss or anything, which is great. The slope to me is pretty unique, and so I would be able to make the finding that they're facing unique topographical challenges. And also, I think it's important to remember that more height is more units. So to lower the height and lose 30 units, like that is 30 people who would not have this place to go. And something important with an older adult living community is that each of those units could mean an entire single family home that's opening up, because somebody would otherwise be staying in their home because they didn't have somewhere like this to go, because it is something that we're lacking. I also think the North 40 taught us an important lesson about height, which is that 5 feet can make a really big difference aesthetically in the sense that essentially, like, we kept the height so low that when they got to the max, they just flattened it, and it looks horrible to many people. I kind of like it. But if we had allowed even 3 or 5 more feet, they would have been able to do an aesthetically pleasing roof, and it would look better without impeding people's views more. So I also think, like, when we talk about the height in numbers, we need to think about what we're really getting for what we might be losing. I like Commissioner Janoff's idea for more lot coverage and less height. I think that could be something worth looking at. And something else I wanted to mention is I've rarely seen the consulting architect have no changes. So I think that says a lot about this project, and that they're at least doing it in the best way possible, probably. So I'm personally in favor of the project. I think that they did it really tastefully. I felt like it fit in well, and I think I would be able to make the findings necessary to grant the 2 variances.
Thank you for your comments, Commissioner Clark. Other commissioners? Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. I just want to echo some of what Commissioner Clark just said, and what all the commissioners have said so far. It is really well designed architecturally, and I was also surprised to see no changes recommended. And I do think that the pictures that we've seen do a good job of showing what it will actually look like, maybe the building will look like, maybe not how it will really sit in the entire neighborhood. That requires a little more imagination. But I do think that it is really well designed, and I do agree that the topography provides a challenge, and I think that the reality is, moving forward, we know that the state is going to continue to require us to just allow for more density. And so I agree that finding if the height can be brought down a little tiny bit without compromising the integrity of the structure looking proportioned and nice, and we would not want the roof to be gone. I do agree that having more lot coverage would be ideal. I mean, this is a facility that even 50% even just seems like not that much for a memory care facility. I mean, I know that, or an assisted living, outdoor and green spaces are important, and I understand the neighbors, you want some barrier and buffer and allow for a lot of vegetation, which I understand, but 50 or even even a little bit more than that, if we could figure out how to get the height down just like a tiny bit to appease people, that is something that I would be comfortable with. But I do think that I could make the findings, like Commissioner Clark just said, because of the topography, that I could grant the variances. I could make the findings to grant the variances. Lastly, I just want to say that I think that we should try really, really hard to come to a compromise and make this project work, because similar to North 40, and there are just so many alternative pathways now for getting development done. And I do think that I think that this is a good place for this facility. Maybe it is a little bit too high, and maybe that's what Commissioner Hansen was really just mentioning more than the type of facility it is, because I do think that there's, like, you know, the vet is there, and it's just kind of like a mix between, it's not quite fully residential, even though there's a lot of people that live near there, and it is near the school, but it's also a little bit of business. So I think it's a good location for this type of facility. And I do think that the neighbors said that they would rather have something like this than apartments. And I do think that having an apartment complex would make a much larger impact with regards to traffic, with regards to the parking issues, with regards to just, you know, a lot of the noise, having people in and out in general. So I think that I just really want this to work, because we don't get a lot of opportunities to do this, and we do need to build housing in town to meet our, or we need to try and attempt to help with housing getting built in town for arena requirements and numbers. So I think that this is a really good opportunity, and I really hope that we can get somewhere, because we don't want to be that place where developers are coming in and using builder's remedy and stuff. We've talked about that here. We've talked about that, you know, when we've been in our general plan meetings and our housing element meetings and all of that. And I know we really want to avoid going down that path. And I just really hope that we can come to a compromise.
Commissioner Janoff.
Thank you. I would hope that the Planning Commission is not making a decision tonight based on a fear of what a different project might look like. So I think we need to evaluate this on its face value, its benefit to this area. You know, builders' remedies are going to happen, and these other bills that builders are going to try to use are going to happen. But I don't want to compromise a project for fear that would happen. So I just want to make that point. The other thing I would like to add, again, having had more experience with senior communities than I really ever wanted to, independent living is not a part of this project. Independent living, in my view, would accommodate or want to accommodate much more open space. When you are talking about assisted living individuals, it's people who don't have a lot of mobility to start, and then it gets worse. Providing as many units as we can, I think, is a priority. So I wouldn't want to lose 30 units. I would want the height reduced, but if you can put more units on the ground and take 50, take 60%, take more land to do it, I'd like to know whether the developer would be open to rethinking the layout if we provide for the opportunity to take up more space. I think that's a reasonable place to go. You could, I'm not going to suggest any re-engineering or architecting of this building, which is quite beautiful, as we've said. But I think it could be done, and this isn't going to sound fair to the future residents, perhaps, but in not so luxurious a fashion. It can be a practical and beautiful, caring, welcoming environment. Doesn't need to have 9-foot ceilings, and you could have smaller spaces. See how we could rethink the overall layout to get you the numbers you want, but in a more compact, maybe lower slung configuration.
For that, other comments? Commissioner Burnett.
Yes, thank you. So this is a confusing one because I think your project is beautiful. I mean, it really is. I think the design, the architecture is really great, the way the building moves, and I mean, it's really what you want. I'm having issues at where it is. Somehow I don't think it's appropriate there coming into Los Gatos. I think, you know, you're going to have a lot of, I have a member over at the terraces, there's a lot of ambulances coming and going all the time. Someone's coming in and going out, coming in and I mean, there's a lot of that, transportation issues. You're by a school, you're talking about 351 trips, daily trips, a lot of traffic right in that area. And I know the numbers, the peak numbers in the morning and the evening are lower than the office building before that was approved. But I don't know, it just seems too big, too massive, too tall. And I just don't think it works there. If you can make a smaller version of it, you know, I could maybe, it would work better for me. But I really think it is a beautiful project, and I commend you for that. But I just, coming into Los Gatos and seeing this massive project there, I just don't think for Los Gatos, you know, our general plan and what we're trying to achieve for our town, and it's getting so hard now that we have to be really cautious on what we move forward, because then you set a precedent for the next project and the next project. So, you know, it's complex and it's sort of difficult. Thank you.
Commissioner Janoff.
I would just like to clarify one point. We hear each project de novo. These project decisions are not setting a precedent. They should not be setting a precedent. Each site is unique. Each set of plans is unique. So I don't want commissioners to feel like approving this project sets an unfortunate precedent, that we hear each and every item on our agendas as a brand new, without precedent item. So you know, just want to be clear that in my view, the Planning Commission doesn't set precedent with decisions. It considers each project on its own merits and makes a determination.
Thank you for that reminder. Commissioner Burnett, and then Commissioner
Yes,
Thomas.
I don't think I was saying that in how you described it, that we're set, a precedent is setting. I'm saying that it seems to open a door for more people to come in to try and, or more developers to bring in their projects for more density or intensity. Just to clarify.
Wait, I promised Commissioner Thomas next.
Just a quick response.
Okay.
We know from the general plan, we know from the housing element that we are going to be seeing more and more of these large developments. And as I think Commissioner Clark indicated, if I'm wrong, forgive me, there's always going to be issues with these. These are unique projects in terms of density and height, and we'll see more and more of those going forward, as we must if we're going to meet our RHNA numbers. So it's uncomfortable for the town, it's uncomfortable for the residents, we understand that, but that's the fact of needing to create more housing in a pretty compact area such as Los Gatos. So I think we're going to see more of these difficult decisions and
Okay, Commissioner Thomas, you're next, and then Commissioner Hanson.
I have a question for staff. I know that we are using the 2020 general plan. I understand that, but I know that what would have been the lot coverage for the 2040? I'm just wondering percent-wise. I should have looked it up. Just because, you know, that did go through some scrutiny and everything, so it might give an indicator of what some of the public might think about a change in lot coverage.
I can't, thank you for that question. I can look that up. Though, as you said, at this time and based on our evaluation, the rules that do apply to this project is the 2020 land use element. And so that is what governs. But I can take a quick look and find that number for you.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question was just a follow-up to Commissioner Hansen's mention of the facility that's being built on
Blossom Hill.
Where is that? Or I mean, you don't have to answer if I don't know. Anyway,
I can
okay,
answer. It's 400 Blossom Hill Road.
Okay.
It's the construction that you see as you're going north on Highway 17 on the right. You can see construction going on right there. That is the project.
Okay.
That she was referring to.
And that, okay, that lot is, so the lot is bigger.
Yeah, I mean, it was a different configuration.
Yeah,
of
it's
site.
also like an
right.
I mean, and also topography wise, it's different. So okay.
And I can answer your other question as
Great.
well.
Thank you.
In the 2040 general plan land use element, we actually switched, instead of a lot coverage, it was floor area. And so the maximum height in the office zone was still at 35 feet, and the FAR was 1.0.
Okay.
Thank you. Still open for discussion. Commissioner Hansen, you had your hand raised.
I wanted to echo what Commissioner Janoff said earlier. I would certainly hope that no planning commission in the town of Los Gatos or anywhere would bow to pressure from a developer to threaten SB 330 or any other law in California in terms of when we have a discretionary decision sitting in front of us and we have zoning codes to deal with, that we would feel intimidated by that. And I personally will not. So that being said, I did want to reiterate what I said earlier, which is that when we saw this at CDAC back in 2020, I was in favor, and I still am in favor of the idea of the senior assisted living project that's here. But this comes with having to take pretty big variances against our building standards. And as I said, I don't know that we have much of any buildings in Los Gatos that are 50 feet. And, we may have to go there for the housing element. I chaired the housing element. I've been sitting on the general plan committee for years. We may have to go there with some of our developers, but, is this the building where we're going to do it for the first time? And is this the right location to do that? And I asked staff about the property, the senior facility that's being constructed on Blossom Hill. That is down in it's sort of down in the hole. It's next to an apartment building complex, but as you're driving down and there was other commercial buildings in that area. So that was an easy thing because there wasn't a lot of impacts to the nearby neighbors. They weren't going to be looking at people's windows looking at them. So I'll go back also to what Commissioner Janoff said. I think that that it would be a good idea if we can try and make this project work, because if you compare that to the alternatives for residential, this is going to be less impact to traffic, because the people will be spending more time in their units versus a traditional apartment building. And I personally would be, willing to go there on trading off the lot coverage for the height, because I think the height is a big deal, and people do value their views of the mountains surrounding and all that. And like I said, we haven't been going there with 50-foot heights.
Commissioner Janoff. And then Commissioner Thomas afterwards.
Just to clarify that the 50-foot, the way I read the plans, a 50-foot height is only because the back side of the lot drops off. That if it were on level, and that affords the opportunity for more units. But so that's a unique feature of the topography. I think that calling it a 50-foot height building is probably not accurate. I mean, it is. But my question overall is, I guess what I'm hearing are some votes in favor of approving this as is. Some votes in favor of asking the applicant if they would be willing to go back and reconsider more lot coverage for a reduced height. Can we ask the applicant?
Thank you for that question. If you have a specific question for the applicant, the chair could choose to open just for a specific question.
I would be amenable to opening the public hearing just for that purpose.
So to just clarify what that question would be, and it's generally a yes/no question, would the applicant be willing to go back and reconsider their plans, keeping the senior facility as envisioned, but with either a larger footprint and a reduced height to get it under the 35? Well, I guess that will be the question. Would they be willing to consider that?
So does Representative Swenson want to deal with that question?
Good evening, Jesse Bristow, Swenson Builders. So I was discussing with my colleague about where maybe we could fit some of that lot coverage if we were granted additional space. There's two portions in the front of the left wing and the north wing and the south wing. But unfortunately, that's where we have our C3, which is our stormwater control. So that would be a significant redesign. I'm not sure if we'd actually be able to capture all that water runoff. But in discussing potentially the height, I'm not, at this juncture, I don't know if we could accommodate the 35 feet 100%. But the first floor, it has all the amenities. It has a full kitchen. So dropping that plate would be really challenging because that's where everyone would be existing, so to speak, when they're not in the room. But the second floor and the third floor, we believe we could drop that floor plate about a foot. So I know it's not much, but that would go from the highest point 2 feet lower, and then we might be able to adjust the mansard roof by half a foot. Again, I know it's not much, but that's 2.5 foot potential reduction. Just speaking on it off the cuff today. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that clarification. Other questions or comments, Commissioner Thomas?
Well, do you feel like your question was answered?
No. Thank you for asking.
I just kind of have a follow-up question to that because I think that I understand that that you can't say, yes, we could totally move a few things around and reconfigure, but I think the question was, would you consider doing that?
So the
Right.
essence of the question is, would the applicant be interested in a continuance on the part of the Planning Commission to allow them to try to achieve some of the objectives that the Planning Commission has obviously voiced?
The public portion has been extended.
Thank you, Jesse Bristow again. Unfortunately, at this time, I don't have authority to say that we can do that. But it's essentially losing that whole floor would be 30 units, and that would be a challenge for us. And they are valuable units to us and to the town. So that would be difficult at this juncture.
So I'm hearing the answer is no. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. Commissioner Raspy.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm going to join in some respects with my fellow commissioners, depart in others. First of all, I'll join in saying this town needs assisted living facilities, as I think all cities in our country. We're an aging population. We need these. We also need significant numbers to reach our RENA allocations, and this project satisfies both those goals. Some commissioners have indicated that they think it's a difficult location. I would argue to the contrary. I think one of the speakers on Zoom indicated that these facilities should be placed in transitional zones. To me, this feels like a transitional zone. You're coming down Winchester, and it's changing. You're coming into town. It feels like a great location for exactly this type of facility. Especially you're going to have, I would imagine, rescue units coming here from time to time. Winchester is exactly the type of street you want those type of vehicles and facilities to use as opposed to quieter residential streets. So for me, the location, the type of project, the sizing, the number of units all make sense for a variety of reasons. And as we've already, I think everybody agrees, the architecture is beautiful. Now, there's a couple things I don't love about this project. First of all, I think the public outreach was probably not handled as well as it could have been. And I would hope that on a going forward basis, the developer and the neighbors would develop a more insightful, helpful discourse. And the height, I think, for me is the most problematic, and it's the most problematic on the Winchester side, not on the downslope side. I agree this is a unique lot situation, although I guess it's technically 4 lots, but the falling away of the street creates the 50-foot issue, and so I think it's less of an issue, more so on the Winchester side. I'm very happy to hear that by my calculations, we've captured perhaps 2.5 feet of reduction in height just in our discussion here tonight by reducing one floor plate and the roof alignment. So while I would have hoped for, again, a better discourse at the first instance and a smaller building currently, I'm satisfied with what we've discussed here tonight, and I would be willing to allow this project to go as we've discussed tonight with the minor changes we've discussed.
It sounds like a possible motion, but we'll see what Commissioner Clark has.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I just really want to add that I would really appreciate it if my fellow commissioners can just really consider approving this project. I really feel like this is about the best we're going to get. Like Vice Chair Raspy said, it's in a transitional zone, which is exactly where you might want a project like this to go, because it really is, its zoning is more commercial, but it will have people living in it, and it's, it's the location makes a lot of sense to me. I think, when people are saying it's too tall or this isn't what we want in Los Gatos, I would like to hear that taken one step further as to like what is so bad about it being however many feet too tall versus us getting more units or getting this much needed older adult assisted living. And I just really feel like we've been needing something like this for a long time, and we have it right here before us. And I don't feel like the reasons that we are finding to deny it outweigh the benefits of this project that is sitting in front of us. And so those are my thoughts.
We appreciate those. Other comments? Commissioner Thomas?
Thank you. I like where Commissioner or Vice Chair Raspy is going with his potential motion, perhaps. And I do appreciate the quick calculations and willingness to drop the 2.5 feet. And I agree with Commissioner Janoff about the backside down Shelburne is not, like that height is not really as much of a concern as the, along Winchester side, and especially for part of that because of the neighbors and everything that live there. I do just want to follow up and say that I also want to echo what Commissioner Hansen and Janoff said about we're not a town and we're definitely not a commission that feel like I do not feel like I can be bullied by developers with the threats of these state laws that are coming down and with builder's remedy and everything. I just think that I want to make sure that I know that sometimes residents, like everyone here, is working and doing a job, and the only reason us up here, well, not the only reason, but the reason that we know about these possibilities is because we have volunteered our time and energy to being here. And I think that I know that I talk to a lot of residents that don't know about these possibilities, and I know that people don't want us to become a town that is known for those things to possibly happen because of any situation. So I just want my comments more are related to the fact that I want the public to know that we're not in a place where we can just say we don't want buildings to be built in town anymore and we don't want development to happen anymore. Like, that time's gone, and I know that it's upsetting to a lot of people. So I just hope that we can agree to all like participate in the process to cooperate. And our job as the commission is, you know, not to be bullied by developers, but to try and like meet everyone's needs, the community's needs, our RENA goals, all of our everything. And so I do think that, as Commissioner Clark said, this is a really, really great opportunity for us to meet a lot of our goals and appease a lot of the concerns with the neighbors. And I just really think that it could be a really great project for our community. And so I really hope that we can try and come to an agreement tonight also.
All right, we've had a lot of discussion. Perhaps we should have a motion and see how that goes. So do we have a motion from commissioners on this item 3? Please. Commissioner Thomas?
I just have a question, I guess, about some of the motion. So Vice Chair Raspy, you are thinking that if we just say, great, you can drop 2.5 feet, that's what you want to meet? Do we want to say, you have to meet the 35 foot at least for the very front of the building along Winchester? I'm kind of curious to see what kind of conditions we would want to what we would suggest putting on this before we go through with the motion.
My comment is that we should get a motion on the table and then discuss it. Commissioner Janoff?
I'll defer to the motion maker.
I'll pop in. This is Gabrielle Whelan, Town Attorney. I recommend confirming with the applicant that they can accept a condition that would reduce the structure by 2.5 feet. And I recommend that the applicant specify exactly where that reduction would occur.
Thank you for that input, and we'll ask for the response.
Thank you, Jesse Bristow, Swanson Builders again. So to clarify, we can drop 1 foot on the second floor, we can drop 1 foot on the third floor, and then we can drop 1/2 foot on the mansard roof. So it would be the 2.5 feet.
Does that satisfy the concern of the town attorney?
Yes, thank you.
All right, so Commissioner Raspy.
Okay, let me try. I move that we approve the demolition of 1 existing office and 4 residential buildings with the construction of an assisted living and memory care facility, variance from maximum height and lot coverage of the zone, merger of 4 lots into 1, and removal of large protected trees on property zoned O located at 15860 through 15894 Winchester Boulevard and 17484 Shelburne Way, APNs 529-11-013, 038, 039, and 040. Architecture and site applications S-21-008, conditional use permit application U-21-010, variance application V-21-003, subdivision application M-22-008, and mitigated negative declaration ND-22-001. I can make the required findings for CEQA that an initial study and mitigated negative declaration have been prepared for this project, that it's been determined the project will not have a significant impact on the environment with adoption of the mitigated negative declaration and mitigation monitoring and reporting program to mitigate potential impacts. I can make the finding that the project meets the objective standards of Chapter 29 of Town Code, except for the height and lot coverage variance requested. I make the finding for the demolition of existing structures as required by Section 29.10.09030 sub E of the Town Code. I can make the required findings for granting of a variance application as required by 29.20.170 of the Town Code for granting a variance application, specifically that because of the special circumstances applicable to the property, including its topography. I can make the required findings for a conditional use permit as required by 29 by .20.190 of the town code for granting a conditional use permit. I can make the required findings to deny a subdivision application as required by section 66474 of the State Subdivision Map Act. I can make the finding that the proposed building is consistent with applicable provisions of the commercial design guidelines. And I can make the additional finding that as required by section 29.20.150 of the town code, the considerations in review of an architecture and site application were all made in reviewing this project. The motion is subject to the following alterations as to the plan submitted by the applicant, in that the the second floor and third floors will each be reduced by 1 foot each in floor plate height, and that the roof will be reduced in 6 inches, such that the overall height of the project will be reduced by 2.5 feet.
Thank you.
Through the chair,
Yes.
just wanted to clarify the findings for the lot merger are slightly unique. It's that none of the findings for denial can be made. Just wanted to clarify for the record that that was your intent.
The motion is modified to reflect so.
Thank you. So we'll look for a second. Commissioner Clark?
I second the motion.
And discussion on the motion.
First, Chair, just additional clarification that the motion does include the conditions of approval in attachments 3 and 4 and the plans provided as.
So amended.
Thank you.
So now we'll move on to discussion. We've had quite a bit already, and we may know the general feelings of the commissioners, but I'll give you another opportunity should you wish. I just want to add that I think the concerns of the neighbors are serious in consideration. I think the building does have a very large presence. I was somewhat overwhelmed when I saw it. I considered the fact that the architectural consultant, Mr. Cannon, did not actually make a determination of neighborhood compatibility, which he usually does. But I've been persuaded by my fellow commissioners that the project overall meets appropriate needs for the community and helps read our arena needs in addition to serving the aging population of our town. And so I am going to support the motion. Commissioner Thomas?
I just have a question about the, I know it's only 6 inches for the roof, but can we include in the motion that the town architect, the consulting architect, like approves that everything will still be within balance with the changes proposed, or would that require a whole new thing?
So that's a proposed amendment to the motion. And
Well, let's see what she says.
I could provide clarification.
Yeah.
It sounded like a question for staff.
Yeah.
That is something that could be provided, but on a building of this size, I don't expect that that will significantly modify the appearance of the roof.
Okay.
One of the things that we do look at for this particular roof is that it is screening the mechanical equipment.
Okay.
And 6 inches is unlikely to make a significant change to how well that is screened, though the mechanical equipment is still going to be the same height, which is part of the height of the building.
Okay. Okay. Then that's fine with me. I just want to make sure we're not messing up the architecture too much. My other, yeah, that's all. Sorry. Oh, no, sorry. My other question was if we wanted to just like ensure that there is like significant screening. I mean, in the pictures that we got, it didn't really seem like it, but making sure that in here in the conditions of approval that they are specified to be a evergreen screen for the neighbors.
I'll ask the maker of the motion.
Question for staff, is that part of the submitted plans? Was it evergreen screening?
I would have to take a look at what the species are on the landscape plan.
If not, one of the conditions of
specify
approval will be appropriate evergreen screening.
On the south elevation in particular?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other discussion? If not, I'll call the question and first ask for raising of hands for those who are in support of the motion.
I'm sorry, Chair. We did just add a condition, the evergreen screening along the south. I wanted to make sure the seconder accepted.
Oh, thank you for that reminder.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So now we'll proceed and ask those in favor of the motion to raise their hand. And those opposed? So it passes 6-1. 5-2? Okay, I miscounted. All right, are there appeal rights on this matter?
There are. Thank you, Chair. The decision of the Commission can be appealed to Town Council by any interested person as defined by Town Code Section 2910-020 within 10 days on forms available online with fees paid. Final deadline is 4 p.m. on the 10th day.
Thank you for that. So our next agenda item is other business. Are there any issues that commissioners wish to raise at this time? I don't see any. So we'll now ask the Director of Community Development to present her report.
Thank you. On behalf of the Community Development Director, I will report out on last week's Town Council meeting. They had 3 items relevant to the Planning Commission. One is that they did approve the Economic Vitality Code amendments that were considered back in June. There were some additional modifications that will go into effect at the end of this month as changing some of the regulations as was considered by the Planning Commission earlier this year. The second is that they did decide to grant the appeal of the fence height exception approval for 380 Blackwell Drive. They chose to remove the condition of approval that Planning Commission imposed and approved the fence height exception. And the third was that they did start a discussion of the story pole policy modifications. That conversation will continue in September. I will also share with the Planning Commission that next week's Town Council meeting will include a discussion and status update of the housing element at the end of the agenda. And on August 24th, the Housing Element Advisory Board will be holding their next meeting to continue to discuss the modifications that staff and the consultants are working on towards resubmitting to the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from commissioners on the report? I don't see any. So we'll now move on to subcommittee reports. In addition to service on the Planning Commission, members of the Commission serve on several town committees. They are the Conceptual Development Advisory Committee, the Historical Preservation, and the Housing Element Advisory Board. And I know we have a report from Commissioner Hanson on the CDAC meeting this afternoon.
Yes, the Conceptual Development Advisory Committee met this afternoon to hear a concept proposal. And just to clarify for those that don't know, the Conceptual Development Advisory Committee is simply an advisory committee, and what the applicants do is they come with a proposal or a concept. It is not a architecture and site application or anything with a lot of plans. It's just a concept and usually has a couple of drawings. This was Venture Church, which is located on Hicks Road, and that what they want to do is expand by adding another school building, not for additional students, but for additional services to existing students. They want to build a indoor gymnasium, and they also want to add a 50,000 square foot lacrosse and soccer field. And they wanted feedback on where to put it, as well as the concept in general. And we gave them some feedback, but the committee was generally thinking it was a favorable proposal.
Thank you for that. And is there a report from Housing Element Advisory Board?
The Housing Element Advisory Board hasn't met since our last meeting on the 26th of July.
Thank you. And Historic Preservation?
Yes, we did not meet.
All right, so that'll end the committee reports. And are there any other matters that commissioners wish to discuss? Commissioner Clark.
I just wanted to say this is very likely my last planning commission meeting. It depends a little bit on travel plans, but I want to thank all of you. It has been an amazing experience. I applied because I knew it was important and I knew that I would care about what I was doing, but I didn't think I'd enjoy it, let alone that I'd look forward to getting my 100+ page packet delivered to my door. So I guess y'all have turned me into a land use nerd, but I'm very grateful for my time. As some of you know, I'm going to New York for a year. I'm going to get a master's in human rights from Columbia. So I'll be back probably giving public comment in a year or something. But yeah, it's been a wild ride, even after being censured and uncensured and having, so many meetings go past midnight. And I've truly enjoyed all of it. So thank you to all of you. I will definitely miss our meetings.
Well, and we'll miss you too. You've been well prepared, offered very intelligent comments, and we appreciate your leadership, as you have called yourself the youngest member of the commission. That's been important to us. So thank you. And if there are no further business, I will call the meeting adjourned.